Kind of eating crackers right now. I'm like starving and I'm too lazy to cook anything right now. I think I'm getting sick.
You sick puppy. Don't get sick. That's bad for you.
Yeah, I know, really. Wish we had an off switch for the onset of sicknesses. That would be great. Let me see here. I don't know if I told you, but I ended up scrapping my whole essay. Did I tell you that?
You did? I think that happened before the last time we talked.
Yeah, I'm gonna still keep the notes though.
Did you scrap it once before?
No, that was the first time.
It was too wide of a scope, if I remember.
Yeah, way too wide. Way too wide. I'll just have to like mention some of these things in footnotes or something like that. I can't submit an essay like that to a journal that's that long. That's impossible.
So just a quick recap. In the last episode, we spent a lot of time on the Raven's Paradox, and we then spent some more time on the Raven's Paradox in that document that I
did we really? I forgot.
What?
I forgot we were talking about that.
You forgot we were talking about the Raven's Paradox?
Yeah, we really did.
But the last hangout, we ended on Thomas Kuhn, C.S. Lewis, and the possible implications of the Kuhnian picture, such as holism, the effects of perception, Gestalt psychology.
Shut up.
Yeah, you were jargon bombing just to end the stream. Oh, we're nearing the end of the stream. Bomb, 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 bomb. Term that doesn't mean anything to you. Term that doesn't mean anything to you. Term that... Okay.
Hopefully it wasn't that bad. I hope.
No, I tried reviewing at least the end of it to kind of try to move along from that point on. I loved the C.S. Lewis quote. I loved the commentary on Thomas Kuhn, but that last carpet bombing.
Yeah. Sometimes it's, in a sense, it's unavoidable because, honestly, and this might be a shortcoming for me, but it's difficult to just kind of communicate these ideas without sometimes letting a text just kind of go for a while. Otherwise, we're just going to cut it up and it'll possibly be decontextualized, and we might be focusing on one little tiny thing which might be illuminated later on 2 paragraphs down. It's just hard to know exactly how to walk that tightrope.
It's impossible, but I don't find such endeavors to be in vain. Like the fact that the author considered it 2 paragraphs later doesn't mean that I don't have to consider it.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Trying to find my notes here. I'm kind of disorganized right now. Hold on one sec. Ooh, there it is.
So,
I think where we were was, I think I was right before I had gotten to C.S. Lewis. I think I had been talking about the nature of scientific revolutions, and I was about to segue into the implications of the Kuhnian picture.
Yeah.
Or the alleged implications of the
Exactly.
possible implications of the Kuhnian
Possible
picture.
implications of the Kuhnian picture, holism, the effects of perception, Gestalt psychology, and the theory ladenness of observation.
Yes.
What is ladenness?
Theory ladenness. Yeah. So in the
It's
context of anti-realism, I
it's
think
the
a
word
main basis for
the word ladenness. I don't know that word.
just like okay. Like let me see if I can think of an analogy. Like this cracker I'm eating is laden with its ingredients.
Oh, something like loaded.
Yeah, like baked into the cake almost. It's ineradicable. So if you were to extract whatever is laden within object X, X ceases to
To
be
exist.
X.
Okay, thank you. So the theory ladenness of observation. The observation ceases to exist if you remove the theory.
Yeah, and typically what is happening with our realistic or our realist intuitions is that when I observe the tree in my yard through the window here, I'm observing something that's observation independent. It's out there, it's mind independent, and I'm coming into contact with this object out there in the world. And the theories are completely independent of that observation itself. So there's like a priority there. There's the observation, then I can construct theories about it. But Kuhn's point is that my very observations themselves are loaded with uh, theoretic presuppositions, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
Because
that's
I mean, even if you say, "Oh, wow, it's external to me," um, that right there is a theory that has been talked about for thousands of years. That's that that could be defended or critiqued. Blah blah blah.
and that relates to the Duan-Quine thesis.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The Duhem-Quine thesis would come in. Um, sorry, eating the cracker. Would come in because if I were to say, "No, you're not observing a tree," right? If I say, "No, you're not observing a tree," and you say, "Why not?" Well, because there's, let's just say, they're talking to a wacko solipsist. He says, "Well, because there's no external world." Now that proposition, there is no external world, can't be taken in isolation. It's completely entangled with however many other hypotheses that are in the background working with that particular proposition. So there's no kind of way to just isolate one hypothesis among the web, just Quine's metaphor, and just say, "Oh, I got some arguments against that part of the web," because the arguments themselves are going to be a part of their own web, and it's just more complicated than that. That's what Kuhn's point was. There's more to there's more to scientific methodology than just falsifying an isolated hypothesis. It's all bound together. It all hangs together. Um, and forgive me, I'm at like 30% right now. I apologize.
So
um,
we'll take it slow and gently.
that's what she said.
I'll use lube.
Let's see here. Trying to remember exactly where we were. Oh, you know what I want to do? I want to unpack this idea of incommensurability. Hold on one second. hmm. Mm-mm-mm. Mm-mm-mm-mm. His thesis, given the theory-ladenness of observation terms or the network theory of meaning, is the centerpiece of incommensurability. Those who live in different paradigms have no common language that would enable them to communicate with each other without equivocation. It is the thesis of radical meaning holism.
The term incommensurable means no common measure.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
So different paradigms cannot be compared because there's no neutral language in which both can be discussed. And any change within a paradigm will alter the network of connections and change the meaning of all the terms within it.
Oh, it's kind of like our conversation about the Ravens paradox.
That's a good point. That's actually a good point. Yeah. So let me see here. I just wanted to get a refresher on that. So all logical, metaphysical, and methodological values are part of some paradigm and cannot be used as evidence for that paradigm. For every logical, metaphysical, or methodological value embraced by one paradigm, there is another that does without it. There are thus no shared values universal to science that transcend all paradigms, can be defended outside them, and can be used as a measuring stick to adjudicate among paradigms. Uh-oh. Someone calling me? I can't jump. So the no shared facts or world thesis. So our perception is always relative to one paradigm or another, one conceptual scheme or another, and we cannot see reality through the lenses of two conceptual schemes simultaneously. Hence, there are no theory-independent facts or perceptions that can be used to adjudicate among theories.
Yes, but what you can do is you can look at it through lenses of different paradigms consecutively and then identify their intersection. Even though they use incommensurable language and terms, you can still intuit which components of the world they would be describing identically or coherently, right?
Mm-hmm. Now, is what you just said embedded within your paradigm?
Yeah, I would.
No, I'm not rebutting what you're saying. I'm guessing what the Kuhnian might say back to you, because I disagree with Kuhn too. At the end of the day, honestly, but
I would say that that's what postmodernism is.
He's definitely postmodern, without a doubt, completely. So you have a point there. I think I might agree with that later on, maybe in different ways, but because I'm not a Kuhnian, I'm going to end up agreeing with you. However, let me play Kuhnian advocate. How is it that you would go about substantiating that privileged? Oh, what's up, Frank? I'm at 20%, by the way, just to warn you. I think I'm getting sick.
I'm always at 20%.
How is it that one gets to the privileged point of view from which you can adjudicate these different paradigms in terms of your idea of intersection and consecutive, whatever you're saying about consecutive paradigms, different elements of paradigms intersecting each other and things like that? How would you go about doing that in a paradigm-free way?
You cannot do it in a paradigm-free way. Right?
Okay,
you can
that's the point.
Yeah, you can consider one paradigm, see its implications, see the concept, the mental construct that it constructs, and it will create an image for you, and you can then at a later point consider a completely different paradigm of the same thing, right? Let's say cosmology, and you will get a different picture, and like the abstract way of describing it would be, this is face up and this is sideways. You will get two completely different pictures, but they will describe the shape that's contained within them. This one will not see what's behind it. This one will not see what's to the left of it. But together, if you overlap them, you will get a container. You will get a confinement, which will tell you, oh, this bit here, this bit where all of the paradigms intersect, that's the reliable bit. That's the thing that you can really say, oh, that's on firm ground. That stands regardless of what your paradigm is.
Nevertheless, nevertheless, everything you just said is theory laden, correct? Therefore rooted in a particular paradigm. So I'm wondering if we take Kuhn's idea of incommensurability, and you were to encounter someone who doesn't share your language at all, what you just said, with its perspectival relativity and all that stuff, how would you guys communicate? Like, how would you guys agree or disagree? How would you guys agree or disagree on the standards of the conversation themselves? It's an interesting, in principle question, because a person, I'm on board with you a little bit, but Kuhn would just explain that by saying that I share a lot of the language in your paradigm. So if somebody came along, just does not share your paradigm whatsoever,
regardless of what your position is,
even your methodology of trying to bring all these different paradigms together are embedded in a larger paradigm.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there must be a point, some rudimentary level where we will agree. And depending on who you are and who I am, it will be at a different point in the conversation. But if we are to communicate, we have to find where that common ground is, even if it is the basics of logic, or that 2 + 2 = 4, right?
See, when you bring in logic, that's going to be a little different, because there's controversy about whether or not you can derive logic from science.
There's more than one logic too.
There's a lot of logic.
That problem as well.
Yep.
Yeah, and those 2 points taken separately, joined are that thing that I said last time. Logic defines science, but science also defines logic.
Yeah, I think the idea of coming down,
not only science, that portmanteau of science and philosophy.
Yeah, MJ, I think that the devil's advocate version of you, I don't know if you already noticed it, but like your devil's advocate is making a mistake here, because it doesn't require, like, he doesn't require it to be math or logic specifically, just some middle ground.
Exactly.
Some slightest overlap of methodology. It could be in like their appreciation of video games. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
However,
as long as there's something to build a unified way of speaking up from, you can get.
We both.
However,
we can start communicating from we both eat and build upon that, right? Until we reach that point where we want to have the discussion. But in having a discussion, in communicating our different paradigms, even if the paradigms themselves are incommensurable. I need to learn that word. Incommensurable. I need to learn that word. There will be some base level at which we can communicate, no matter what we are.
Yeah, nothing is completely incommensurable.
Nothing is completely incommensurable.
Otherwise, the very notion of incommensurability wouldn't make sense.
However, I mean, I just want to be careful and charitable here. The postmodern is completely aware of this self-refutation objection. I think me and Frank talked about it before. That the self-refutation objection is embedded within a logocentric philosophy. So if that logocentric philosophy is jettisoned, you're not going to be able to use that self-refutation
Yeah, but we don't
objection
have
with
to-
as much robustness as someone
I have a
who
Chestertonian counter to
endorses
that.
it.
Did you just use really big words to say if we can't communicate, we can't communicate?
No, this is even more important.
The Chestertonian counter to that is that if you're going to dogmatically throw away logic, I'm going to dogmatically return to it, and we're done talking. I don't
Well,
want
that would be totally fine, pragmatically. But what I would tell Chesterton is that, okay, if you want to go back to logic in the logocentric way, that don't make it so in a logocentric way.
Yeah, it does. The logocentric, according to the logocentric way, self-refutation is a sufficient condition for the belief in a thing. So according to my own view is internally consistent. The logocentric can appeal to self-refutation of alternative views to take on their own view. That's
Right.
the argument
Yeah.
to absurdity. So,
But the postmodern embeds logocentrism within its system. So just mere belief in it isn't going to be sufficient to render logocentrism a meta-narrative, which they deny. They deny meta-narratives.
Somebody needs to define logocentrism.
And the nature of the denial is going to be in a non-logocentric way. It's going to be in terms of power upheavals, language, deconstruction, things like that. They completely jettison this privilege. Oh, but by the way, Frank, I'm on board with you. I disagree with it. I just like to represent it properly. I represent it properly, and I know exactly what they would say. I was fascinated with postmodernism for a while. It's harder to refute than I thought. But they completely deny in a non-logocentric way, so we can't appeal to their denial as a species of the self-refutation objection. They have their own analysis of what denial means, this logocentric framework within which to understand the nature of self-refutation and things like that. And they could probably even ontologically relativize it to a language game. I think that might appeal to Wittgenstein in the language game of self-refutation or things like that. But
yes, but like to play any language game whatsoever, there are certain preconditions.
You can't get rid of it, though, can you? You got to take off those glasses. That's what they want you to do. So that first little impulse that I have too. I have the impulse too. Oh, but the language game itself needs a frame for the picture, right? They want you to jettison an entire impulse.
I refuse to jettison it.
That's fine. And they can explain that refusal. They can explain that refusal in terms of you wanting power over the nature of
yes, but their explanation
of speech.
Oh, the refutation of their explanation.
That's totally fine.
Their explanation of their dogmatic explanation is a dogmatic counterpoint.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
If they say that they're right without argument, then I can say they're wrong without argument.
Yep. But we have to go to their literature and go on their own ground and see what they say.
At all.
Oh, I do. I'm open-minded, so I go over there.
It's not a matter of closed-mindedness. They're the ones who are being closed-minded.
That might be a species of closed-mindedness, honestly. I mean, until me personally, I can't in good conscience condemn them with the self-refutation objection unless I first read what they have to say about it. And I read about it for years.
Well, I mean, like in conversation, right? Like, yes, if I want to talk, if I want to encounter a specific, like, so this is the truth of any self-refutation. But this isn't particular with postmodernism. This is true with even sola scriptura and like pretty much any claim. Anytime you want to use a self-refutation objection to any view, you should be prepared to interact with the complex forms of those views. If that's the type. Well, no. If I am attempting to refute a complex view, I should attempt to understand the complex view. But I'm attempting to refute the view as you have presented it. So there's this problem with the appeal to. There's this argument which is like, again, not to be. This is a fallacy. I think I want to distinguish between the appeal, the false appeal to authority, and I'll call it the appeal to the scholar. And it's roughly like this: if you argue with somebody, and they come up to you and you know, like, they'll admit that you've understood their view as they presented it, and then you'll get about 10 steps into the conversation. They'll ask, "Have you read the scholars on this?" And if you say no, then on that ground they'll dismiss you. And it's like, I'm talking with you, not the scholars. Like that's the problem.
That's not what I'm doing. I'm not dismissing what you're saying. I'm going to say that I'm not going to be persuaded by your criticism because of my years of exposure to the scholarship. I'm not obligating you to go read the scholarship. And you could be totally rational in keeping with your logocentrism. That's fine, because what I presented is probably completely insufficient. But I got to be epistemically responsible too. We're in two different epistemic positions. I have my memory of reading the scholarship.
Are you in devil's advocate mode right now, or are you talking about yourself?
I'm talking about myself.
Okay.
I think we are being governed right now by two different kinds of epistemic responsibility. We have been exposed to different scholarship on this. You might be epistemically obligated to keep with your logocentrism just on the basis of what I've said so far in this conversation, but my situation is completely different than yours. I have to make a distinction between either accurate representation of the scholarship that I've read or my conviction that I think that I've insufficiently represented it. And then number three, my ability to go look to my right now and go to the scholarship right there and to see if I've insufficiently misrepresented it. But I can't do exactly what you're doing. You might be completely rational and being non-persuaded by what I'm saying, but I can't use that as a basis for thinking that.
I understand what you're saying. You're concerned that you're not presenting the view well enough to, in your devil's advocate mode, concede to my argument.
Well, there's two things going on, though. I think I have. I think I have. Mere disagreement isn't going to make you obligated to think that you are right and then I'm wrong, or I'm right and you're wrong. There might be a bunch of different things going on right now. I disagree with your criticism of the way I've represented postmodernism. I criticize it differently. But as far as the level of conversation where you are disagreeing with it, we could just keep going. I would just disagree with your criticism. And I could be wrong. I could be wrong about my criticism of your disagreement.
Where do you think I fail precisely? Was it this idea that I need to read the scholars more? Or is it?
I think you have too quick of a trigger finger on that impulse to just self-refutation. And it's not sensitive to what the postmoderns have actually said about self-refutation. I mean, that's your scholarship point. And then I've summarized it and paraphrased it by just saying they embed the self-refutation objection within a wider narrative. And then they lose that narrative in a sea of power upheavals.
Wait, so the narrative is distinct from the power upheaval thing?
What's that?
The narrative they employ is distinct from or within the whole idea of power upheaval?
It's within the whole idea of power upheavals, completely. So this impulse that I have, and I had to be very careful when I read the scholarship on this, because I'm trying to be open-minded, and I'm not saying you're not. I'm just saying I want to understand this position as best as I possibly can without ridiculing it. Not saying you are. This is my autobiography. No, this is my autobiographical explanation of how I got into it. And it's a lot more complicated than what a lot of people, like even I read Plantinga. I read Plantinga, and his dismissal of postmodernism at the last part of Warranted Christian Belief is awful. I think it was just horrible. He doesn't deal with the literature at all. It was almost like reading Calvinists on Arminians, honestly. They just don't read Arminians. And I don't think Plantinga had read postmoderns, and it just shows in his appendices. But yeah, that's it.
So are you able to, in your devil's, are you able to further express the whole issue with self-refutation? Like, can you offer me somebody specific to read on self-refutation objections?
I refute postmodernism by the existence of God. I jettison the non-existence of meta-narratives by proving God's existence, who transcends all narratives. And then I try to go for a coherence theory of truth, where my beliefs are true insofar as they cohere with God's set of beliefs. And so I get rid of that correspondence relation, and I cash it out into the coherence relation. And I found that
So
What's
I
that?
reject your reality and substitute my own.
What I was asking for,
That is an option.
what I was asking for was where in, it's like, so I've read very little postmodern stuff. I recently actually tried to and failed to read on grammatology, and I was like, I don't understand any of this.
No, I wouldn't go to the primary literature
Yeah.
first. I would not do that. Yeah.
My brain roughly exploded. Do you have any like suggestions that I could get online for specifically referring to self-refutation, because that is my go-to.
Now, there is a point to self-refutation objections that I think they get wrong. I forget exactly what that is. I'll have to get into this again, because I really would love to get into this. I think this is a dogma. No. Let me take that back. It's not a dogma. The way in which it's wielded is kind of dogmatic.
I see.
Not a lot of people.
It's a bias,
and not therefore false. Not therefore false. This is almost like epistemic viciousness. Like it's got a tradition of virtue epistemology. I'm not saying it's false. I'm saying it's wielded in a vicious way without really understanding exactly what's going on with the self-refutation objection and what the point of contention is between that objection and the postmodern thesis. Let me see if I can get something off the shelf here.
While he's searching for that, I would just like to state this conversation is slightly going over my head.
Is it? So I don't know. Like, I've been actually thinking about self-refutation. Like,
I'll be right back. I'm going to get something real quick. I'll be right back.
Okay. I don't know if I can explain what was going on, but my whole epistemology is largely meant to attack skepticism, extreme forms of skepticism, and also certain forms of presuppositionalism. So all I really have are self-refutation objections, but I've also realized that I sound more and more like a presuppositionalist the more I employ my view. So I've been trying to figure out how to stop that, and I have no idea. Like I even talked with Christian anarchists for a short period of time, and I was trying to explain why I view, like, the way my epistemology treats sola scriptura is very, it's like if I can find a way to make a thing refute itself, I jump onto it. I'm realizing that that's not good, and so I'm seeing him say this here, and it's like,
yeah, but that's. I think I've already expressed my objection to your method, that you treat it as though it's a refutation, that self-refutation is a refutation, where from my point of view, it's a valid criticism. It's a good cause to discard the conclusion, but it's not a refutation. It just makes the argument irrelevant. Right?
What do you mean?
When you attack skepticism if you doubt that I'm a person that has that.
Oh yeah, so yeah, there's the pragmatic. So yeah, I suck at. So there's two levels of my objection. There's the pragmatic counter, which you agree with, but there's the conceptual counter, which you disagree with.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time articulating the conceptual counter. It's something I need to work on, but I've sort of left it in, it's not this, my thought isn't on that right now. I'm focusing a bit more on metaphysics.
The outcome is the same, but the conclusion is not.
Yeah. So yeah, the conceptual, that's why I need to work on the conceptual. So like a lot of my thoughts on skepticism were like sort of found their unity in a work by James Conant called the two varieties of skepticism. And I've told you about this before, but I'm really good at refuting Cartesian skepticism. I really kind of suck at refuting Kantian skepticism. It's not that I can't refute it; it's that I can't articulate the refutation for the life of me. So, because like it ends up getting ridiculously complicated and no one can follow it. But like the idea roughly is, you couldn't even formulate the doubt unless it were false. Like that's the idea. But persuading somebody of that is hard. So what I want to say is that if you want to deny, well, it's not quite true with certain forms of, again, I don't know, it's complicated. But that's my same sort of knee-jerk reaction to postmodernism. Sorry if I ruined your hangout.
No, it's fine. It's awesome. That's why I invited you to ruin my hangout. As usual, I just love watching you and MJ gush.
We weren't really gushing at that point. Like we were seriously.
Yeah, that's gushing. That's debating with gusto.
Ah.
What I'm gonna do is just because I haven't researched this issue for very long, I'll get back with you, Frank. I'll give you a good list of essays and stuff. I did find that SCP does have a pretty good essay on it. I was scrolling through it. Maybe start there and then branch out from the bibliography. But just don't go to the books, just the essays.
On postmodernism or self-referential?
I would definitely start with postmodernism and then go to the self-refutation objection from there.
Oh, is that in? Is it
What's that?
self?
But postmodernism is great. It allows me to talk to you without getting angry at you.
That's not necessarily true.
I know. So I have my own interpretation of postmodernism, which works for me. I know that some people misuse postmodernism to get angry at people.
Mm-hmm. And then because it's about power,
yeah,
you have your understanding of it, but my understanding is correct, quote unquote, and yours is incorrect, quote unquote. Because look, I'm a part of this university, and I have all this funding, and we're going to say that what you said was crazy, and we're going to employ the language game of logocentrism to actually demonstrate why you are objectively, quote unquote, wrong.
Yeah, and
there's a lot of bracketing going on.
I understand that, and I would say that that's just a vile misappropriation of postmodernism.
That's okay. We'll just shoo you away from academia.
Yeah.
That's just Barney over there in his crazy corner. That's literally how they.
Barney likes it in his crazy corner.
That's cool. So, but if you were to start a blog, if you were to start a website, if you were to start a podcast, and you started making an impact on culture, you would become a threat.
Yeah,
and then we would have to start paying attention to you. But as long as you're just doing hangouts with losers like MJ, and except for Frank, he's the man, and you're fine. We can leave you alone, and you can do all the criticism of postmodernism you want. That's literally the mentality.
Yeah, the fact that things can be interpreted in different ways does not mean that you get to enforce your interpretation. That means that things can be interpreted in different ways. That's my take on postmodernism.
That's your subjective take on it.
Yep, it is.
And then if you were to say, and then that's the self-refutation objection. So if you bracket that, this is my subjective take on the situation. Is that subjective or objective? It would be subjective.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. And if it is subjective, who cares? In terms of truth. In terms of truth. And that's why they nest truth in power. They're like, okay, I don't give a crap.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all these nested little relationships. And I think power is nested. It could be nested in a Nietzschean kind of way. It can be nested in a Darwinian way. There's all these different ways you can nest power. And it's just distinguished by how it's manifested in society and culture and individuals and things like that. It's really, really interesting, honestly, even if it's quote unquote false. Maybe. It's hard to tell.
Random assertion. Saint Francis was a Nietzschean Übermensch?
That's not random. That's neither a random nor an assertion. What are you talking about?
Well, that's a fact.
Let's deconstruct facts. Derrida. What does Derrida say about facts? Let's not go down that road.
Deruda?
Huh?
Deruda? Is Derrida Deruda?
Derrida.
Derrida.
Commensurability.
Thomas Derrida. Thomas Deruda. A French footballer. No. Okay, never mind. So, where were we? What the hell is holism? As a possible implication of the Kuhnian picture.
Holism has to do with how, if you want to confirm a scientific theory, you have to confirm, or sorry, if you want to.
Yeah, there's a connection between the parts and the whole.
Yeah, it's when you test a theory, you test the whole theory or something. I should know this. I knew this very well a while ago. It's confirmation
Systems
holism, right? Confirmation holism has to do with something like, if you want to verify a theory, you have to verify the whole theory, not just or something.
I think we were using it meaning holism because we were talking about Kuhn's paradigms. So,
oh yeah, the meaning of a word is related.
The meaning of a language relative to a paradigm is going to be related,
yeah, you can't understand
interconnected with every semantic constituent of a paradigm.
I don't entirely disagree with that. Like, if you want to understand what Aristotle is talking about,
right,
you need a good introduction to Aristotle. If you want to understand what scientists are talking about, you need a good introduction to their vocabulary, because they're going to use normal words in a way that, one, they're going to have a whole bunch of words that you just don't know, and two, they're going to use normal words in an abnormal way. So he's not wrong. Like there is a degree of talking past people going on, but again, the very fact that we're able to enter into this kind of meta conversation about talking past one another indicates,
right.
And that's
now, how would you adjudicate though between a paradigm that jettisons self-refutation and one that affirms
what paradigm that jettisons self-refutation look like?
Well, you got to understand how look like would be understood by a postmodern. So in our heads, in our imagination, we have like this picture of a picture frame on our left and a picture frame on our right, and there's this wall in between it, and you got these nice little borders, and it's just great and orderly, and there's the monolith.
That's what I mean by look like.
Space-time odyssey. No, I'm using an analogy because the way Kuhn understands these paradigms, I don't know how you understand paradigms in your imagination, but I have, like, in my imagination, little bubbles.
I have like a what does Barney work on? The web,
neural
webs,
network.
yeah.
The neural interface. What is it called?
Neural network.
Yeah, neural network.
Neural
That's what I have in my mind. I have like a whole bunch of dots with a whole bunch of arrows and then like pulses going between them.
Two completely disconnected
that
neural
arrange
networks.
themselves in different views.
Exactly.
So
you'll have one neural network completely disconnected from the meaning holism that is a necessary, essential part of the paradigm that would affirm self-refutation. Oh, hey, kitty. So they would not affirm that. They wouldn't affirm the supremacy of that meta-narrative within its paradigm. So then you have someone who's approaching both paradigms from the outside. What rules could that outsider use to adjudicate between the two paradigms, given this thesis of meaning holism? Hey, kitty. I think my kitty wants some cat food, actually. I'll be right back. I apologize. Hold on one sec. Sorry.
Go ahead. Basically, last time when we talked, we touched upon classification and categorization, and that we can my assertion was that we can just create classes out of any regularity that we perceive, whether or not that regularity is there, or yeah. And I would say that those networks, again, from a postmodern view, from my view, you can construct two seemingly completely different networks by saying that a node is a class or a concept which you will define as such, based around one regularity, and then construct others around it with their interrelations, right? And another person or another paradigm might have a different definition of a class, which might take a little bit of your class and a little bit of this class and a little bit of this class to say that's one class, right? And then take another part of this one and this one, this one.
It's like the way I picture that is sort of like you have like a set. Well, there's both the set and there's the membership relationship. So I want to keep both in mind. But like you can have like rough sets. So like, well, no, that's not right. But like you can have like intersections of sets, but the intersection admits of degrees, and then membership can admit of degrees. And
yeah, so this touches upon the definition of a member of a set, right? Where you can define something as a member in one paradigm, where in another paradigm, that wouldn't be a member. That would be components of other members. So here it would be 3. In another set, there would be 1 in A, 1 in B, 1 in C. It would still be 3, but you wouldn't see it. It would be the elements of that set would be distributed. The components of that member of the set would be distributed to other members of the set. And when you line them up, they simply don't line up. There's practically nothing to compare if you want to say they're describing the same paradigm. But if you consider one paradigm and then consider the other paradigm, you can see some similarities. There will be some agreement, let's say, in prediction of an outcome. And there will be wild disagreement in extrapolated or emergent properties from that set. For those things
that would constitute a paradigm, though.
That I understand that is my paradigm. But beyond that, you get into incomprehension, right? So the paradigm that I'm talking about would be the most base level possible communicable thing, where if we have that, we can communicate and then we can compare everything else.
What do you mean? What would be an example?
The fact that we are talking, that
really? What do you mean by we?
Fuck off.
No, I'm serious.
That's
not a trollish. That's not a trollish question. I promise.
Okay.
Because once you encounter the philosophers of science, they're gonna disagree with your example. I know they are. I've been around them. It's really hard to set down, and this might be a species of the demarcation problem, a set of individually necessary and jointly sufficient conditions for what would constitute a foundational claim that would be shared by all paradigms.
Yeah, right. I think this is again.
Oh, sorry, Frank.
No, sorry. I'm just thinking.
This is the part where I think I'm in line with Frank. If we cannot agree between you and me what we are, what the term "we" means, then we have bigger issues than philosophy.
No. That's not my point. That's not my point, though. That's not what I was saying. Agreement. You're going to find people that agree with you on we.
Yeah,
and that would just be Kuhn's point. That's a paradigm. That would be a paradigm. But then you're going to have people that are going to disagree.
Yeah,
and that'll be a point
with
a paradigm would.
How can you even speak of people disagreeing?
Yeah, in every
there's going to be different understandings of what disagreement means, what it implies, what it constitutes.
If somebody else disagrees with what I mean on disagreement, then either we're agreeing on what we mean by disagreement, or we're not. In which case, we're not disagreeing. In my view of the word disagreement, and it doesn't matter to me.
Well, there's two different things going on with what you just said there, though. You can you can disagree on what you guys mean by disagreement, right?
Yeah.
What you're agreeing on when you disagree with each other on what disagreement means is the methodology by which to adjudicate the debate. So there's two different things going on there. And the next question, the meta question, would be whether or not you could meet someone who would disagree with you on the methodology of adjudicating the disagreement debate. So you got to like back it up more.
We wouldn't be able to talk with one another. Like the solution, once you get to a certain point where
you got to back it up one more. You got to back it up one more. So then now you're having a meta discussion about the nature of the methodology of adjudicating a debate about disagreement. If you're talking to that person, you're going back and forth with them. Now you're in agreement on the methodology of adjudicating the debate about the correct methodology of adjudicating the debate about disagreement. You just got to back it up one more. And it can regress in a potentially infinite amount of ways depending on what the nature of the debate is. But there's always going to be some point of contact.
It will regress
that person.
With
I didn't hear anything you said. Sorry. Go ahead. My bad.
With any set of more than one minds, it will regress to a point of agreement. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I disagree. I believe that there's
it'll never be.
I believe
it'll never be universal agreement. You always have Franks that come in.
I believe there's a point at which disagreement becomes, in which conversation becomes impossible. I believe that there's a point at which people just look like they're conversing with each other and they're not. But generally, one of them can tell. And if they both can tell, then they're both probably in hell. And then
I would say that that's a practical limit, not a real limit. That's the limit of people give up on trying to find the common ground and just say, oh, it's too much work to build our conversation from basic epistemology or logic or maths up, right? Even though we agree on those things, the conversation would take centuries to get to a point where it's productive.
That's not quite what I mean. The part and portion of so my desire to enter into a friendly conversation with you is part of the rules of the game of conversation, right? The reason I'm not cursing you out right now, or whenever I talk with you, I don't take videos of everything you say, push it up elsewhere, and misrepresent you as much as I can, and do everything I can to defame you, right? That's because I have a certain set of rules with which I approach conversation. That is, be nice, be kind, do as I would have others doing to me. But another person could have a completely different approach to things.
Yeah.
Another person could just be the game they are playing is so fundamentally different than mine that I couldn't talk with them. That if they were talking with me, or if it looked like they were talking with me, you'd be wrong, right? That they are not doing the thing that I do with other people. In fact,
cool. That's exactly it. My notion is that even if they're unwilling to talk to me or approach me in any way that is a meaningful conversation for me, I can always reach out to them. I can always start talking in their language and communicating with them on their level.
Would you want to do so? So there's the problem, right? Yeah, so for some people, I'm not willing to do that, right?
Exactly, and that's the part. That's what I was just saying.
There might be an insane person out there who will only talk to you after you've killed somebody.
Yeah, you're not willing to. That does not mean that you're not able to. So I again restate, the regression is not infinite. The regression always regresses to the point of mutual understanding. You might be unwilling to reach that point, but that point is somewhere. It is not infinite.
What about with the guy who's always
it is just undefined.
Like I can find some really wacky scenarios in which it wouldn't work. Imagine the guy who every time somebody tries to talk to him, he attempts suicide. Conversation is impossible with that individual. That's his rule, right? You can't talk with that person. You can't get that far. But like there are ways of. So if you can have a guy,
that's not a conceptual barrier though.
Well, I can just shoot him.
Yeah, it is, because his rule is I will try to kill myself every time somebody tries to speak with me. Right? That's his rule.
I can
there are less extreme rules, right? but that are analogous, right? You can commit conversational suicide. Every time somebody tries to talk with me, I run away. Every time somebody tries to talk with me, I smash them in the face. Every time, like, there's a whole bunch of rules.
No, what I mean by conceptual barrier is that it doesn't have any bearing on truth or falsity.
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean by that? Like, so we're talking about.
Well, if I say that 2 + 2 = 4, and the guy's like, if you tell me that I'm going to commit suicide, what would happen is he would die, and 2 + 2 would still equal 4.
I don't think that was what. Like, I wouldn't deny that, but like, I'm talking about the practice, the practicability. So there's.
Talking about successful conversation?
Well, yes, but that's related to yeah, I've lost my train of thought.
Barney's fault.
Huh?
It's Barney's fault.
No,
So we're talking about
I don't see how any of this refutes
paradigms, right?
Right.
Paradigms which are so different that people cannot communicate in those paradigms. I'm saying that you can always regress one level down and one level down, and that it's not an infinite regress, because there will be some level where agreement is theoretically possible. There is a point where you will give up before reaching that point. So the person who commits suicide, when you try to talk to them, is reaching that point instantly, right? But that's not a failure of there not being a common ground in the paradigms. There is some level, and there are many more practical reasons why that level wouldn't be reached. As I said, because
once common ground is reached between paradigms, it's no longer Kuhn's point. So, like, in that process of revolution that I was talking about, there's this coalescence, this gradual coalescence between these two paradigms, the expectations of two paradigms, this growing foundation between the two. And then you have, like, internal conflict and things like that. And then suddenly there's a shift. And but prior to that, prior to two paradigms talking to each other, there is no common ground at all. So I don't think this has anything to do with refuting Kuhn at all. I think Kuhn would agree with you there, and he could totally, like, appropriate what you just said into his philosophy of science.
Yeah, but wouldn't that imply that no two paradigms are truly incommensurable?
Well, depends on where you are in the. Hold on, let me see my notes here. So incommensurability between two paradigms is going to be, it's always going to be the case. But so you have anomalies, the recognition that nature has violated the paradigm-induced expectations that govern normal science, a phenomenon for which a paradigm has not readied the investigator. So now the lines of the paradigm are becoming blurred at that point. And so when people come in and try to explain the anomalies, you're going to have people from all these anomalous perspectival paradigms come in to try to resolve that paradigm in their own way. And at that point, I think what's going on is what you're saying: connectivity, interconnectivity. There's becoming this agreement between maybe methodologies about how to go about solving the anomaly, all that stuff. Get a crisis generated by the persistent failure of the puzzles of normal science to be solved as they should. So that's another fundament that all these people in the community of the sciences start agreeing upon. Can't solve this anomaly. What's going on? We need some sort of explanation of this crisis. So you could either resolve it within the old paradigm, and then those different little subsidiary paradigms would just collapse back onto the major one. Or you postpone a resolution and you bracket the problem, and then you have all these incommensurable paradigms come in and try to solve that anomaly in a way that would be agreed upon. Maybe a solution to the anomaly would involve a methodology that the community of sciences are just going to be hostile towards. Like, think about ID theorists. I mean, the scientific community is hostile towards them. They think it's just stupid. It's a waste of time. It's dumb. And that's okay. That's okay. The ID theorists have to earn it. And or you have a revolution, and that's what the ID theorists are hoping to do. They're trying to cause a revolution, and it's totally within the Kuhnian picture that they're going to be met with ridicule at first, and that's okay. They have to earn it. They have to go, take it on the chin, publish their essays, get made fun of a little bit. That's just the way it works. But all of that is completely compatible with what you were saying before about finding common ground and all that stuff. I mean, this is when the paradigms begin to kind of overlap in such a way that the lines of incommensurability become blurred. And you have to kind of tailor whatever that blurriness is to whatever way they're trying to solve the anomaly and all that stuff. But all of that is conceptually in line, I think, with what Kuhn would already say. I think he'd be on board with us right now. All power to Barney, I think he'd say. Yeah.
Basically, with two hypothetical, objective debaters with infinite time and willpower on their hands, they will find a way to communicate, even though they hold to incommensurable paradigms.
Well, and that would be conceptually like there's a simultaneous thing going on here. So once you do attain that point where you can communicate, incommensurability is already starting to blur. It's already starting to crumble. They're finding a common ground, and a new paradigm is emerging with its own borders, quote unquote, that would disagree with the paradigms that disagree with the way they're adjudicating the incommensurability within their own paradigm. So it's just kind of this morphing, liquidy, formless dynamic, I'll call it, to be complementary to it. But it's always changing. What, Kitty? What do you want? What do you want? Come here. Come here.
And that's what I would say is the proper application of postmodernism, like treating everything with that fluidity, and then kneading it and forming it and looking at it until you find a way that works. And,
works. Good. Yeah. That's a good word. They would love that. It's got to work. That's all we need.
Yeah. And next conversation with the next person might not be at all compatible with the one that I'm having with you. Yeah, but I found a way that works with you, and I found a way that works with him, and it's within me to find a way that I understand both of those at the same time as different perspectives on the same issue, on the same paradigm, on the same.
Was Frank going to say something?
No, I'm sort of working on a thought. So, like the issue with, this is the ultimate issue with a purely pragmatic approach. So if we're viewing postmodernism as a kind of,
can I say one thing real quick? I would want to sharply distinguish pragmatism from the Kuhnian anti-realism. But go ahead.
Well,
I'm not saying that you were saying that. I'm just saying I just wanted to point that distinction out. It's a distinction made in the literature.
Okay, but if they're looking for, there are always ethical concerns whenever you hear somebody say, "Well, it works, and that's all that's necessary." It's like, what do you mean by that? But like, on the level of the philosophy of science, I'm not too concerned. I'm concerned with how this echoes into postmodernism and other areas, right? So if and this is the thing with power, right? Everything is ultimately power kind of idea. It's like, well, power is a means to an ends. So what is the end you're using your power to? And what they're going to try to do, I guess, is rehash all of ethics in terms of power, and that's where I become. I don't know. That's where things got weird.
So, one point that I would like to make is that when you call it non-real, I'm very blurry. Ooh, clarity has been achieved. So You call it non-realism. I would say that it's local non-realism. It's non-realism in respect to each individual conversation. But the thing that enables you to look at it from different perspectives to use the one that works is implicit realism. It's the recognition that there is an underlying reality which will connect all of those perspectives into some coherent whole, which might be non-cognitive, which might be impossible to work out in the same sense that you can draw on a paper a cube from 6 million different angles, and it will never be a cube.
So the non-rational, non-realist would respond and say, you have to prove that. You have to prove that there is an aspect of reality outside of our local paradigms that are completely theory independent. And how would you get there?
I don't know.
It's Kantian. It's transcendental. What's it called? Not idealism, but
I would say
non-realism. I guess you could say epistemological non-realism. There we go.
I would say that the assumption that there isn't one underlying reality underlying everything and connecting everything into a coherent whole would enable complete chaos and inability to communicate about anything ever in any way. Or
cosmic chaos, not local chaos, right? I mean, dealing with cosmic chaos and just it seems pretty normal right now because we're in this local pocket, right? This local paradigm that we're all agreeing on. It's conceptually bad news, pessimistic, but we're good.
Let's go with simple concepts. If there are but two realities, right?
Okay.
If there are just two things which are distinct from each other and can both be equally called reality, and you are communicating here and I'm communicating here, the thing that's connecting them is our communication, and that will make them into one reality.
That would be a theory dependent reality, though.
That would be a theory dependent reality.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. So that's for two. Sum up all such realities and all such theory dependent interpretations. Their intersection would have to be one unique reality.
So that's your theory about the reality that underlies theory dependent reality.
I think the word theory is somewhat misplaced there. It's a speculation. It's a thing that makes sense to me.
Well, I think Kuhn would.
It's my basic assumption.
Would say that it's completely impossible to extricate yourself from theory.
Fair enough.
Divorcing reality from theory. But I don't have a problem with that, honestly, because I believe in a cosmic perspective. But I think theism would really help you out, Barney. I really do.
It comes at too high a price.
Oh no, my phone. Dang it. I'll be right back. Sorry. This thing is so unpredictable.
What you working on, Frank?
I'm something that MK said. Sorry, not MK. MP.
MJ.
MJ. Yes. A lot of people whose names are. Whenever I hear somebody use the word flux, I immediately think Heraclitus, and I immediately then think the refutation of Heraclitus, right? So, but because I think it was Heraclitus, or it may have been Parmenides, one of the two, who said everything is flux. You can't step in the same river twice. That kind of idea. And Aristotle, and by extension Thomas, largely refuted that. And I have a very very skeleton-y understanding of the history of philosophy. It's not well worked out, but I have a vague view of the history of ideas and whatnot. And he linked certain things to Kant, and that immediately makes me think of Descartes, right? Because Kant is attempting to resolve issues of the rationalists, which you have the rationalists like Descartes, and I can't remember the other guy, which ultimately lead into Hume's skepticism and Kant's countering Hume's skepticism. But I disagree with the whole Cartesian project, because I think Descartes' an idiot. I mean, he's a genius, but he concedes to skepticism, right? Cartesian skepticism is something I believe you can't actually do. It refutes itself, right? Cartesian skepticism is self-refuting. And so I would take a kind of Aristotelian approach to matter, and consequently to the noumenal realm. And so my view of perception, which is, again, needs to be worked out a lot more than it is now. I didn't say not again, but it needs to be worked out more. It's not like I stated before, but would kind of raise an eyebrow to Kant's approach to things, because Kant's approach to things is entirely aimed at resolving problems which I don't think exist. So like I'm not interested in Kant that much. I think he is attempting to resolve problems produced by a self-refuting view. And so if there is this leading into and you have this idea of modernism, which is related to the Cartesian project, and postmodernism is sometimes characterized as an attempt to show the problems of modernism, right? The failures of modernism and whatnot. And so if we're talking about, if we now bring in Kuhn, and I hear conceptual dynamism, right? I hear this idea of there's this kind of this kind of identity of the paradigm and how it's sort of melding into each other, which sort of leads to the question is like, where do paradigms get their identity? Under what conditions is it? Like you say paradigms are changing, but is it the same paradigm or a different paradigm? There's a question sort of how, under what view is a paradigm absorbing another paradigm and persisting in its identity, or in what one case is a paradigm completely lost? So you can bring it into sort of Newman's development of doctrine, which is a way, I know I'm like, I can't really explain that, but I know I'm just immediately seeing a couple of things which I'm probably not educated enough to really put into words.
Fair enough. I'm trying out my hand at Cartesian method of.
Doesn't work.
Oh, I don't care.
It's stupid. It's.
You're stupid.
It's.
Sorry.
If your attempt the Cartesian method is to doubt everything, it's to try to get rid of everything you possibly can.
Yeah, and then build it back up from things that you simply cannot remove.
Yeah. What is to formulate the entire project that the very formulation of the project presupposes a whole bunch of things. It presupposes common sense.
Yeah.
So you're attempting to, so you're presupposing common sense in an attempt to refute common sense.
I'm not attempting to refute common sense.
That's what the Cartesian project is function. It's attempting to get common sense back by getting.
I'm not trying to be Descartes. I'm trying my hand at.
No, I'm trying to. So if the approach, it's not possible, right? You can't actually do what you're trying to do. You can't get rid of stuff because you started out presupposing that you can, which means you've presupposed the entire category structure of common sense, which means you're presupposing common sense whilst saying that you've started out from nothing, right? So you're saying that you're starting out from nothing when you're not. You're starting out with everything. This is the problem. This is my critique of Descartes. Kind of is like he's saying he's trying to start out with nothing when he isn't.
Yeah,
he's failing.
I agree with that.
So, and that's what happens to anyone who attempts to use the method of remission, right? Like I think that's what it's called. Like Descartes, the Cartesian method. It's self-defeating. It's not even self-defeating. It's self-stultifying. It never even gets off the ground. It just looks like it does.
Yeah, and I like the fact that it looks like it does.
Okay.
So I'm starting with I perceive, and then proceed from there.
Which, yes, but like the whole point of the semantic holism or whatever is that, well, to speak of I, you already have this whole system of ideas just inherent there.
Or we're back at Descartes.
Well, I think Descartes like dumb. I mean, like,
I love Descartes. I think he's awesome.
He's a genius, right? But I mean, he's like, I think the method of doubt is wrong. I think it refutes itself.
Really?
Yes, I think that he tries to get rid of common sense whilst presupposing common sense.
How does he do that?
Well, he doesn't try to get rid of common sense. He tries to get back to common sense by starting from nothing, but he's not actually starting from nothing, because to even speak of starting from nothing is to presuppose the entire system of categories which common sense gives you.
What is this, Barney?
It's my me taking a hand at the thing Descartes did, whatever it's called.
Oh, this is your representation of Descartes?
No, this is my representation of me, but inspired by Descartes.
So demonstrate premise 1.
I am demonstrating it. I am perceiving something.
That presupposes there's an I there, right?
Yeah.
So demonstrate there's an I.
You presuppose that you exist.
Yeah, and that's missing the point.
That's how you refute the cogito.
No. I agree with that. I'm fine with that. I'm not refuting your criticism. I'm saying that what I'm doing is not what you're criticizing, right? I'm not trying to build a worldview of reality. I'm not trying to find the truth. I'm trying to build myself from what I perceive. And
but if you're trying to get to the I from the perception, then premise 1 begs the question.
It does. That's fine. That's fine with me.
Okay. That's not too high of a cost.
No.
Barney, we have a lot of work to do with you now.
I'm quite comfortable with assuming.
I'm so glad I get to beg the question with you now.
I kind of understand what you're. Are you trying to like lay out the basic concepts of your view, as it were? Like,
yeah. So
like, if that's the case, then it's fine. Or like I can kind of understand.
Yeah. If I
doesn't look like that. It looks like you're making an argument.
If I, being me, and from my position, try to start off from as little as possible, right? The thing that I can say is that I perceive, and I can build from there. I can say things that I perceive, which might or might not relate to reality. I can say what I perceive, as I perceive it, and what those things would imply, and what things I can deduce from that perception. So Descartes was trying to disprove his demon. I'm not trying to disprove anything. I'm just trying to build up things upon each other to see how far I can get. How much of my understanding of everything I can build up from concepts as simple as I perceive.
Yeah. So what about the relativity of starting points, though? So I could start with premise one, God exists, and I could say, I'm just conceptually unpacking what would happen after I grant premise one.
Yeah, but I would say that that's a worthwhile exploration of an idea.
Yeah, it's mapping conceptual space, but it doesn't tell you what's true or not in terms of reality.
No, well, reality is part of the conceptual space.
Oh, right, it's a subset. Yeah.
So we'll eventually tell you what's true about reality.
Oh, right, conceptual reality. But there's more to reality than just conceptual reality.
Yes, but reality is a concept. And so you can't talk about reality non-conceptually.
Prove it.
Why do I have to prove it?
Because I disagree with that. I don't think reality is just a concept. I think my concept of reality and reality is...
I said that it is a concept.
I don't think it's just a concept, though.
I didn't say it's just a concept.
Reality is a word. You need to provide a definition in order...
I agree with that. I also think there's a reality to which the word corresponds.
Yes, but to speak of correspondence is to speak of things and therefore to conceive of things. Like you're...
Sure. I have that distinction between semantics and that to which semantics corresponds. I can't extricate myself from language. And part of my conceptual web, I guess you could call it, is that semantics involves correspondence to that which is non-semantic. My concept of X being non-semantic is that which is corresponded to by the semantics. Even though you need language to say that, that wouldn't mean... Like I need the word Frank to refer to you, but you're not the word Frank. You're Frank.
Yeah.
So the premise, the first premise here is that I perceive, and it's based on experience. It is based on me perceiving it. I cannot deny that I perceive, right?
Yeah, I think all that would follow from the phenomena of perception is that there is perception, not that there is an I doing the perceiving.
Well, except that...
But everything has that without which it wouldn't exist.
What?
The principle is sufficient reason, and you immediately get the source.
Oh yeah, we need to smuggle in different premises there to justify premise one. Well, sufficient reason would be a good premise.
But my experience isn't that there is perception. My experience is that I am perceiving.
Well, your experience. So, how do you know the experience that is there is the experience of any given individual, such as yourself?
I don't know any of that. I am perceiving.
or here's another way of putting it. So who are you that you might perceive? That's probably
I don't.
What
know.
is this I?
I don't know.
Quid est ego?
No. I don't know what I'm perceiving. I don't know what I am. I don't know what existence is. I don't know any of that. But I know that I am perceiving. And from there, I know that I exist. And from there, I know that I can know something. And from there, I know that I am self-aware because I can perceive myself perceiving. And from there...
I still think you're begging the question with premise one, so I don't think you can know anything.
I'm begging.
Well, you admitted it.
No. It is an... I'm not begging the question intentionally. It is an... I'm trying to be as honest as possible, which...
Honesty is a virtue. I like honesty. That doesn't necessarily mean logical.
There's a question of depth, right? So it seems that you're saying that the notion of perception presents itself to you earlier than the notion of yourself. That you have to first think about perception before you can even think of you being the one who perceives. Um, so there is a kind of ordering of concepts, and there's a degree to which I agree with that. There's actually a good work, Logic and Mental Philosophy, but it's a scholastic work. It's a little old, so the logic is actually really old. It's 100 years old, so it's before the logical revolution of the mathematical, the mathematical crisis and the foundational crisis of mathematics. So a lot of logic it's outdated a bit, but
does your brain outpace your mouth sometimes, Frank? I see that with you sometimes.
You've noticed.
But he concludes largely in I think it's in the latter half of the logic. It's evidence is the ultimate. So what you are calling perception, what he would call evidence. What
was the book called again? I'm just going to look it up.
Well, it's called Logic, but like if you search it up, you can find it for free online. It's Logic and Mental Philosophy. It's 2 books, Logic and Mental Philosophy. It's by the same author, I think. The Logic is in 2 halves. The first half is just it's sort of Port Royal kind of stuff. Well, not quite. I don't know.
Who's the author?
I actually never read the Port Royal, but
who's the author?
The second half is more epistemological.
Okay, who's the author?
Wait, let me find. Reverend Charles Coppens. Oh, I didn't even know. It's the guy who debated Bertrand Russell. I think I might be wrong.
Oh, I think it said Charles. Is it Frederick or Charles?
Charles Coppens. It's Charles. Maybe it's a different guy.
Frederick Copleston is the one that debated.
Oh, Copleston. Never mind. So it's a different guy.
But Russell's debated a bunch of people, so who knows?
No, I was thinking of Copleston. It's Reverend Charles Coppens. So it's not Copleston. But it's a brief textbook of logic and mental philosophy. So maybe it's one book, but it has
really interesting. Oh my goodness!
You found it? It should be on the Jacques Maritain Center. Is that where you found it?
A bunch of places. I'm at Amazon right now.
Well, it's for free on University of Notre Dame's Jacques Maritain. I can't even pronounce it. Maritain Center. That's where I found it. But
Maritain, Jacques Maritain.
Just logic. Like here, I'll just.
Okay, but I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to look it up. But go ahead. What were you about to say back to Barney?
I don't remember. Oh yeah. So like actually, I'll screen share this. So no, I won't. But just as you were talking about perception, he sort of like he concludes with this. So he actually is doing it in a completely different order than you are. But
different paradigms.
But this sort of priority of evidence, or what you call perception, right? So he's using evidence, which is I think roughly what you're using as perception.
Wait.
So
I'm still not convinced. So hurry up. I want to pick Barney's brain.
I'm not going to be able to explain it. Never mind. You guys talk.
You just appealed to scholarship, Frank. The heck?
What?
Just kidding. I'm kidding.
You just appealed to scholarship.
Yeah, but
we gotta go buy this fat book to understand what you're saying. I'm just kidding.
Wait, what? I wasn't dismissing you though.
What?
Huh?
I cut you off again. I keep cutting you off. What'd you say?
I said I wasn't dismissing anyone's view on the. Never mind. I don't get jokes sometimes. Most of the time.
Well, I have Asperger's too, man. It's not that bad. It's a spectrum. We can still love each other.
I can have Asperger's.
I can have Asperger's.
I have been diagnosed with it. I got diagnosed with it like about 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Just like whatever. I don't care.
Whatever. So
you might have it, man.
You wanted to pick my brain?
Yes. Why don't you? You said you're accidentally. You're not intentionally begging the question with premise one. Because I want to be convinced by this, and I'm not yet. I'm not trying to disprove you.
Oh,
I'm trying to be convinced by it. There's something in my mind getting in the way here.
Let me.
I don't like begging the question.
Muted. Okay, can you hear me now? Instead of presenting myself, I hid myself from my own stream. That was good. Why am I accidentally begging the question? Because I cannot avoid it. It is.
You can always avoid begging the question.
The only way I couldn't experience perceiving things was if I didn't exist, in which case none of this would exist, right? Not metaphysically, literally, I wouldn't exist.
Well, okay, that's another premise there. I would put that before premise one then. So a premise that's supporting premise one, so you're not begging the question. You're saying that perception is bound up with existence. And then I would say, therefore, I perceive, right?
Yes, but I don't know that, right?
You don't have to know it. It's just an axiom. You're just going to conceptually unpack what would follow.
Yes, but I'm not building a system of logic. I'm trying to go from as small an epistemic point that I can. And I would say that saying that it is required to exist in order to perceive, or however you formed it, would be.
All right, well, let me ask you this then. When you say that you know premise one to be true, what's your theory of knowledge to substantiate that?
I experience it, and I cannot avoid experiencing it. I cannot turn it off, nor can I imagine it being any other way.
Okay, and is experience defeasible?
Is experience defeasible? Some experience certainly is.
And how do you know this one is not?
Because if this was defeated, then I wouldn't exist and I wouldn't be able to perceive, but I perceive.
So it sounds like you need this philosophy in order to substantiate your desire to exist. It sounds like you start off wanting to exist, and then you postulate this conceptual framework to substantiate that thesis.
I don't think so.
You want it to be true, therefore it's false.
Well, you want one to be true, therefore one is left unsupported.
I cannot avoid it. It's not that I want it. Even let's make a counterexample.
I think you can avoid premise one. What you wouldn't be able to avoid is the phenomenon of perceiving. I think what you want to do is inference to the best explanation. Like, I have these perceptions, and the best explanation for why I'm experiencing these perceptions is that I exist.
Yes, but you just said I have these perceptions.
Yeah, in order to
no, the best explanation of it. So it's abduction.
So presupposed in this entire thing is this sort of encounter with another, right? So the reason why does one specify themselves? Well, you're either speaking to yourself or to someone else, and so you need to distinguish yourself. You need to distinguish speaker from spoken to. So there is a directedness of the speech towards an interlocutor. So the usage of I in this case is not a signifier of knowledge. It could be a signifier of something like speaker perceive, speaker perception, right? It doesn't need to say the perception is related to the speaker in a way that it is distinct from the perception is related to the speaker in a way that it is not evident in a way that it is not evidently related to.
Sure. Make that more fundamental than premise one. And I could see premise one flowing from that. And therefore, one wouldn't be begging the question. It would be flowing from that more fundamental premise.
Well, what I just said was largely a restatement of premise one.
Yeah.
It didn't sound like that to me. I don't see how what you just said and premise one have the same meaning at all. There was a lot more concepts in there. Definitely not semantically identical from my perspective, but I could be wrong.
It was an explicating of everything so presuppose is the wrong word, because it's more like the speech act, right? So the act which is being performed in the statement I perceive is that you're involving yourself in a certain type of conversation, and so all of that is just included by virtue of you being the reader. You are supposed to, by whoever reads.
You're saying affirming premise one would rationally compel me to believe what you just said about speech acts?
What'd you say?
Rationally affirming premise one would compel me to believe whatever you just said about speech acts? Well, there you go. So if it doesn't compel me to believe what you just said about speech acts, then we would have to make your speech act thesis a more fundamental premise from which premise one would flow.
Yeah, the language game of speech acts is an explication of everything which is already implicit in the statement. If
it's implicit, if it's already implicit, then I would be compelled to believe that if I affirm premise one.
If you understood what I was talking about in terms of speech acts, then you would.
That's a necessary condition for understanding.
Well, in that case, yes, you would. What I'm saying is that it's not obvious.
And you think that's not debatable at all? Do you think there's other ways to unpack premise one than just speech act theory?
There's plenty of other ways. The language of speech.
So I would need an argument. I would need an argument for why your specific explication of premise one in terms of speech act theory is the case. And now we're in the land of additional premises from which premise one would need to flow. It would need to follow from whatever you just said. Because it doesn't compel me to believe in speech act theory.
The only way clicking the wrong thing. The only way I see to resolve that is to say which is exactly the same as premise one, right? So the premise one is not ontological; it's epistemological.
I still see zero as begging the question. I think the more fundamental premise would be there is experience and there is perception and there is experienced perception. And then you would need additional premises to connect the I to that and then make premise one flow from that.
Yes, but from my epistemological viewpoint, I'm unable to say that there is perception without perceiving, right? Without me perceiving that there is perception. That would be just a vacuous statement. That would
really,
yeah.
I don't know about that. Why do you think that?
So there is, I still think that we're talking about different facets of the same thing.
Let's define it then.
Wait, you're trying to build up reality from ground up. I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to build a worldview from inside out. The first thing that I am aware of, if I try to remove everything else, is that I perceive something.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't, I don't know if there is logic or if there is reason or if there a lot of those things will be presupposed by what I am,
mm-hmm.
but from my epistemic point in premise one, I still don't know that. I don't know what I am. I don't know what I'm perceiving. I don't know that senses exist. I don't know that there is such a thing as reality. From the first thing, if I try to remove everything else, the first thing that I experience is that I perceive something.
What about in dreams? Just out of curiosity.
That's
There's
fine.
perception, but there's not there's not something of which you not something of which you, sorry.
I'm not defeating demons. I'm not defeating confusions. All of this could be wrong. I'm not trying to figure out truth. I'm trying to figure out I'm trying to build out the world from within, from a point where I am to the outside, not from the. So all of it. If I'm a Boltzmann brain,
okay.
that has just appeared with all of my experiences, it would be wrong to say that I think. I have some memories of thought that like Descartes begins with I think, and I think therefore I am, right? If he was a Boltzmann brain, he would have the memories of thinking, he would have the experience of thinking. It would last shorter than a single thought, and then he would be gone. And you cannot say that he would be thinking, but he would perceive that he is thinking, right?
No, I'm not convinced by that. While he exists, it would still be true to say that he thought, even before he went out of existence. I don't see how that follows.
I would say that a thought requires some passage of time.
Yeah. Boltzmann brains emerge and then they go out of existence. So in that little snippet, he can think. Otherwise, he wouldn't have affirmed the cogito. So I'm not following that.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, that he cannot confirm cogito.
I don't follow that. While the Boltzmann brain emerges,
I would say that
he could affirm it.
I would say that thinking is a process. That
Sure.
you cannot think for an instant.
Sure. I'm not denying that.
Okay? And a Boltzmann brain can exist for an instant and still have the experience of thinking. Why? Because it is formed with all the memories of its life before that moment. So it would have memories of thinking.
Sure.
But it wouldn't be thinking.
What do you mean by thinking?
Processing ideas and analyzing things and having thoughts.
That's what I would want to say.
Monologue, or
I don't think you necessarily have to go through this passage of time from one instant to another. You can just have a thought instantaneously. And that thought would imply Descartes' existence for that little snippet of time. For me.
Fair enough. Okay. But I would say, so for me, that would be a redefinition of the word to think to something slightly strange.
I think it's plausible that Descartes would be on board with this, though, just to have a thought. Unless there's some kind of nuance in the French that I'm missing. Sounds like he's just saying, look, if I have a thought, I exist. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a thinker that had the thought. But I don't get how what you just said, that you're not trying to build reality from the ground up, you're trying to go from the inside out. Pardon me. Going from the inside out, and you're divorcing truth from constructing a worldview. Is that what you said?
Yeah, because
I'm at premise one. I don't see how you can the cost of dispensing with truth and building a worldview seems to me too high. So I would want to know that premise one is true before I could go on from there.
Yeah. So
from my position, from my standpoint, that's a completely undeniable truth.
Then you know it.
If I were to really take issue with this whole thing in the way that MJ is, I would say that epistemology is not the first philosophy, so you're sort of doing it the wrong way around. You should actually start off with that attributes, properties, objects, identity, categories. That actually all comes first. All this other stuff comes later.
BRB. Be right back, guys.
I start off with common sense, really. So, like, what is the... And by common sense, I mean the common sense categories. I don't mean, like... I'm not saying that you're not being common sense. This is
and with that, I would agree much more than with MJ's criticism.
Yeah, like, I would say that...
I am presupposing common sense, but I'm presupposing it because I'm not aware of it. Right?
Why aren't you aware of it? Like, I mean, by speaking with me in the way that you do, you indicate to me that you are aware of it, at least to a degree. But you have decided to enter into this particular self-examination by eschewing common sense, leaving it off till later. Like, you leave it off attributes, properties, objects, identity, categories. You leave it off till later, and you start off with, okay, I'm just going to start off with I perceive. And it's like, well, why? It's like...
because I do.
But like, so the question is, so why is that the first? Really? So is it arbitrary? In which case, you're not building it from inside out, as MJ was saying. It's more like you're just starting from somewhere and then unraveling the connections, which is fine. I have no problem with that. But it's not well motivated. I mean, the ordering is not well motivated. It's just arbitrary. If you started off with common sense, it would be well motivated. It's like, oh, look, we have a whole bunch of these ideas. Included in them is me.
No, look, wait. It's not arbitrary. It is based on experience. Let's say I deny everything that I know. I'm still me. I still have the knowledge. I'm just denying it. What is the first thing that happens next? Is it that I start analyzing what are objects and what are attributes? And no, it's not.
No, nothing happens next. You've contradicted yourself. You've denied everything that you know. You know all these things, and so you simultaneously denied them. Nothing happens next. There is no next, or everything, or worse, everything happens next, because from a contradiction, everything may be inferred.
Wait, what? I didn't make myself disappear. I didn't say that.
No, I'm saying logic.
I said everything is false. I'm saying let's say that I don't know anything. What is the first thing that happens next? I perceive something. Nothing? What do you mean nothing?
Happens next. There is no... It's like, you know nothing. Okay. Done. You wouldn't even know what to do next. Among the things you don't know would be the method.
Yeah, I don't know what to do next. But I perceive something. Right? Whatever that perception is. I'm not qualifying what the perception is. I'm not qualifying anything. There is an abstract perception. There is some perception going on. Right?
But yes, yeah, sorry.
And it's not just that the perception is. I am experiencing that perception. From me experiencing that perception, I can say that I am. And from me being aware that I'm perceiving that perception and that I am self-aware. I am aware that.
How did you get your words? I thought so you say you don't know anything. You say, I perceive something. Why are you allowed to speak? You're presupposing your knowledge of language, which seems to be counter to the method that you've employed before. You say you're,
and I agree, and that's the thing where I said I agree much more with that criticism than MJ's criticism, where I am presupposing reason, right? And I am presupposing language and coherence of thought, but inevitably I cannot do otherwise.
Yeah, well, that's why the Cartesian, why I disagree with the project.
Yeah. So, does it work for describing reality? No, it doesn't. I fully accept your criticism. I'm not trying to describe reality. I'm trying to describe my worldview, my vantage point. How from any given position, becoming completely skeptical about everything to a point that I don't know anything, how does it build? How does the system reboot? Let's put it that way. I'm not a tabula rasa. I'm not a non-existent being. I'm not trying to create a human. I'm trying to go through the cognitive process of recreating my knowledge such as it is.
Tell me if this characterization is fair. It is as though you are somebody who has struggled with extreme skepticism for several years to the point where you've near gone insane, and now all of a sudden your mind's really clear.
That's a very good description. Or somebody who, let's say I'm me, and I find out that I've been drugged for a period of time, or I've been brainwashed, and I don't know what I know. I don't know what I've read. I cannot trust any information that is in my head. I still have my brain. I still have my language. I still have, but what is the process that I would go to reboot my knowledge, to keep as much of what I can? And the parentheses that are everywhere are something that I intend to elaborate on. What are the epistemic limits of each statement, right? When I say I perceive as the first statement, there is a very clear notion that I don't know what I'm perceiving. I don't know that I have senses. I don't know what are colors. I don't know, right? I know that I am perceiving something. It's the very same notion when you say I know. When you've been describing that you know something. How do you know it?
Are we still on premise one?
No, I'm trying to explain what I'm doing.
Yeah, the project he's taking on. So yeah. We're not even at premise one. We've gone back a step.
Okay.
We're talking metadata about the project, let's say. So,
I'm looking at your bookmarks.
You're looking at my bookmarks. Plural site, Lin-Manuel Miranda Math, Croatia Airlines, Hessian.
Jimmy Explorer. Croatia Airlines. Awesome. You want to get out of there.
Come to America. We got cheeseburgers.
I got a guest bedroom, Barney. Come on over, man.
Sure. When do you want me over?
You have to philosophize all the time. That's the only condition.
Oh no, I have no idea how I'm gonna achieve that. You will never get me to philosophize all the time. So yeah, it's an attempt to rebuild, to define the epistemic limits of each of those statements, and kind of reduce them to what I can surmise from my immediate experiences and perceptions. And there is hopefully a way to get to reason and logic and all of that from it.
like this is the Cartesian project, and like it's like I don't know if it's the right way of approaching things. Like that's.
Uh-oh. Sick him, Frank.
Like I've already explained some of the so. This is so. Look, when I gave you my example of Imagineer, a guy who's been struggling with skepticism for a couple years, you know, I'm describing myself, right?
Yeah, I know.
So do you struggle with
something I've been struggling for a while? So I don't know if I should just jump back to Catholicism or whatnot, because I've actually like been going over my conversion process after I've gone to extreme skepticism, and I've realized largely that the conditions under which I converted from within the system which I deconverted from were illegitimate, right? So, so strictly speaking, so there's a question of whether or not I am still, technically in the Catholic paradigm, and I've been in there the whole time. And if that's the case, then I have to go back, right, immediately. But on the other hand, I'm more or less doing what you're doing. I am, working out a kind of systematic approach to things and seeing whether or not that asymptotically approach Catholicism or asymptotically approaches something else. But I have no idea if the entire thing that I'm doing is justified. I don't know if I should just jump back, and that's the issue I'm having with this. I don't know if it is well motivated, is the way I'm putting it. I don't know if it can be well motivated. And that's actually an extremely deep existential problem for me personally. So I don't really know how to critique it other than saying that
It's
even you yourself seem to be implicitly admitting that it's not well motivated. Right? It's just something that you're kind of doing for the hell of it.
Yeah.
But like, what worth does this project have in any way, shape, or form?
I'm going to take a stab at it when you're done, Frank. I think I got a slam dunk argument against Barney right now.
What was it?
Knockdown argument.
What worth does it have? I don't know. It's a bit.
I mean, like, that's because that's my answer with the stuff that I'm doing. But
that's so postmodern.
I know, and that's a problem.
It's just a work of art. It's beautiful. You have these beautiful tapestries floating in the void, quote unquote.
It's a poem. Right.
Let me know when you're done, Frank.
No, I'll stop for now because I don't know how to progress the discourse quite.
Okay, the move from premise 2 from premise 1 is a non sequitur. And the reason why I say that is David Hume. David Hume did not believe in the self, and yet he believed in perceptions. If you can answer that argument, we would need to inject more premises into this perception, me, knowledge, self-awareness, reality block.
Yeah.
In order to substantiate the argument.
I don't have a problem with that, because at premise 2, I don't know that David Hume exists.
That's a hell of a counter. That is amazing. I don't pay attention to your counter arguments to my view because I don't know if your counter arguments are even there.
Well, I am not convinced by that counter argument, and let me say why.
We don't know if you exist yet, so shut up.
If it is indeed the case, if it is indeed the case that you can deny the self and have perception, regardless of whether or not you know that that's true, then therefore 2 is a non sequitur from 1.
No, that's exactly it. Whether or not I know that, but this is my epistemic worldview, not my ontology, right? So if I don't know it, it doesn't exist.
See, these seem like epistemic inferences then, but see, these look like logical inferences.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Right.
That's the way my brain works when I.
If it's logical inferences, these are necessarily the case. And what I'm saying is, if I can give you a view that doesn't have the self and has perceptions, then I'm snipping that necessary connection between 2 and 1. Regardless of how you autobiographically go from 2 to 1. I'm saying it's still a non sequitur, so I can't
Okay.
go along with it. I'm not convinced.
Good. Congratulations. You have, and it still doesn't change it, right? That
Oh, it changes it. On pain of irrationality, you can keep it there, but
on pain of my rationality, I can keep it there.
irrationality, because I'm assuming it's irrational to move from 1 to 2
Which what you've forgotten is that
without being guilty of a non sequitur. Regardless of whether or not you know it, it's still necessarily the case.
It's still necessarily the case. I don't know what necessary is at point 2.
We cannot yet take into account your.
That doesn't matter. That confuses epistemology and metaphysics.
I know.
I just think it's an amazing counter. It's just whether or not it works, it's awesome.
I'm currently very much enjoying that Frank likes it.
I fail to appreciate how this is a good comeback, but
it's not a good comeback. I'm not saying it's a good comeback. I think it's hilarious.
Neither am I.
It might be my aesthetic handicapped. I cannot appreciate this comeback. To be consistent, though, I can use Barney's comeback to rebut pretty much any criticism he has towards any of my views.
Yeah, that's the problem.
So, the idea is that by the time I'm done with this, I will, in my subsequent steps, correct errors of the previous. I will realize where the errors are and correct them, right? This is basically me applying my sense. I'm not sure I can say common sense for one person, right? It's not common with anything.
I don't think that's what common sense means. But
yeah, I know. The idea is that as I go through them, I will figure out which of those previous steps were wrong and why. But I don't know them at the point. So I will have to rediscover skepticism, solipsism, and stuff like that. Stuff that I being me, not being the document, am aware that I cannot avoid, that I have to take into account.
I don't know if you can go from 3 to 2 either. I'm looking at this. Just because you know that you are, it doesn't necessarily follow that you know that you know that you are.
Yeah,
that would be a jump, I would think.
You have completely stopped listening to what I'm saying,
and I don't think 4 would follow from 2 either.
You're concerned about and you're concerned about skepticism. You said, really? So
no. The idea is to go naturally as I would, as my mind works, because that's what I'm left with when I remove, right? So I will make mistakes. I will come to wrong conclusions.
No, not Barney.
What I'm hoping is that through that progression, at some point, I will be able to use some premises to invalidate some previous or modify some previous premises, right?
So is this like a
rough draft?
Well, yes, but like it's like a bug log, right? Like when you're writing a program, you have the log of everything you've done before. And
yeah,
so it's a revisions.
Exactly, it's a reboot. It's what happens when I'm trying to reboot, right? So I will. My first instincts, my first realizations can be wrong. I don't mind them being wrong because I can correct them hopefully, I hope that I can correct them by building up from that. Right?
By becoming a Christian. That's my skeleton key. Solves everything.
The idea is that even if some of those assumptions are wrong to begin with, the contradictions will become apparent later, and I will be able to exclude some of them, remove some of, not remove them from the file, but put a line saying, oh, I just realized that 2 is wrong because I am now aware of this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
And
Everybody goes to this.
That puts into question 3, 4, 5, and right?
Right, yeah. Everybody does this. Yeah.
And
I agree.
But that I will be able to have the whole stream from one to a coherent set which works.
And as is, you will one day come to see that this cannot get you out of skepticism.
This cannot get, yeah.
I mean, that's I think ultimately what postmodernism is talking about, right? So that's how at least one site that I read has put it, right? So postmodernism, understood in one way, is the quote unquote Cartesian project. It is the attempt to do this, right? To start with complete doubt of everything as you possibly can, and then to work up from there. But what you have is the first kind of failure of modernism is found by Hume, and then Kant sort of is like, oh, I'll one up you, but he's still in a sense working on the Cartesian project, even though he's rejecting it at the same time. And then that goes down through like Hegel and stuff. And I guess kind of, I don't know enough about the history. I think Nietzsche is like kind of going to be at one type critical of some stuff. Stuff goes around in the area of the history of philosophy, which I suck at.
Whirlwind tour of history of philosophy. Kant comes in there, he does his thing.
No, like you have Descartes, you have
context, like Kant.
Well, yeah, like so Kant is known for like rejecting. The point is that you have this history of attempting to fulfill Descartes' kind of approach to things, and over again there are minor points which cause a whole collapsing of a system, and then that system is sort of rebooted, as it were, and it's constantly collapsed at single individual points from within itself. It falls apart and enters into extreme skepticism.
But you also have the pre-moderns.
Well, that's the types of people that I'm interested in, right? Like I think that pre-modernism is the way to go. That is the way to go. I agree. And the question is, well, I don't really understand pre-modernism very well. Like I very much like scholasticism, right? Like you said, the answer is to be Christian. The problem with that is that it's vague. What is it to be Christian?
Sure, I'll oblige that. I'll oblige that question.
Because like different people will give different answers to that question. Postmodernism is also something in theology, right? There are postmodern theologians. There are modernist theologians, right? Like there are papal encyclicals directed towards both of these topics. Yep. And so you have this mesh, which coming from a purely philosophical perspective doesn't really help very much.
But that assumes that you can't be steadfast in your beliefs in the presence of pure disagreement.
I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying from somebody who is not in the Christian view, trying to figure out what the Christian view is a real pain in the ass. Because really? What? Is it really?
Yeah.
Yeah, is Catholicism true Christianity, or is it Protestantism, or is it Orthodoxy, and if it's any one of those, like if it's any one of those, even within Catholicism, you have the left and the right. Within Orthodoxy, you have some people who are more extreme and more not. And within Protestantism, you have a couple. There's lots of overlap, but you have the Calvinists and you have the Arminians and you have.
Well, I would just say that I would do that necessary sufficient distinction. I think it's sufficient to be a Christian if you're a Catholic, but not necessary. And that would go to different criteria that we could all agree on what's necessary and sufficient to be a Christian.
Yes, but different Christians disagree on the necessary and sufficient
conditions. Yeah, that's fine. Disagreement doesn't do anything. to objectivity at all,
I'm
or
not
even
saying
knowing about
I'm
objectivity.
saying, like,
Can disagree on anything. Like I've been disagreeing with you on this, but you're still pretty steadfast on what you're saying, right?
yeah, like, my issue isn't with disagreement. It's what is Christianity? How do you?
Your reason for not thinking there's an answer to that question is because Calvinists, Arminians, Catholics, Protestants all disagree about what it is, right? So it is disagreement, right?
No, it might, but I don't know. I don't know if it's disagreement. It may or may not be. I
Seems
need
like
to
that's what you're saying, but that's fine. Okay.
Like, I've struggled with the issue of pure disagreement before, so that may or may not be influencing me on some subconscious level. I can't deny that. But on the other hand, I don't, unless there is some degree of sort of psychological whatever stopping me from saying that, it doesn't seem to be the case. So my intuition is telling me that it's something else, but my intuition may be corrupted. So I don't know, which is why I say I don't know.
So I think there's going to be disagreement on pretty much every definition that you can put on the table regarding something, even science, which is the demarcation problem.
Yay, demarcation problem. That's the name of the...
Well, there's demarcation problems for pretty much every concept. I mean, what distinguishes non-Christian from Christian? What distinguishes science from non-science?
Yeah.
There's always going to be debate about what that is, but that doesn't mean you're lost in a sea of subjectivity about what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And if
Some
you're
people can
allowed,
be wrong.
you're kind of doomed to interpret it for yourself and have a subjective faith-based belief about it. And if that's all it is, then I'm a Christian.
Welcome to the kingdom, Barney.
I'll
use any means necessary.
Yeah, I just interpret it in a way in which God doesn't exist.
No. That's a pillar. That's necessary, but not sufficient.
So I just wanted to point
lunchtime
out
for me. I think I might go get Pizza Hut.
I just wanted to point out that point 14 already reaches that point where I can just remove the 2 to 5 conclusions.
By actual, you mean corresponding to something that's mind independent, as opposed to dreams? Is that what you mean by actual and imagined perceptions?
Yeah.
Okay. Or hallucinations or things like that.
Yeah.
Because it could be an actual perception of an actual hallucination, right?
No, I literally mean imagination. I can imagine perceptions.
Ah, okay.
And I can sometimes distinguish imagined perceptions from real perceptions, from things that I'm actually perceiving. But that would imply that I sometimes can't. And if I sometimes can't, then that puts an epistemic limit on all the perceptions that are listed here.
No. That's okay. Just because you can't sometimes, you don't have to do that. Why would you have to do that?
Because I could have just imagined them.
But coulda isn't sufficient to overturn knowledge of actual perceptions. Like I could be in a matrix right now, but that doesn't mean I can't know I'm not.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that I cannot possibly. It means that I don't at this moment.
No, I mean, you said you cannot now at this moment because it's possible that you would fall victim to not distinguishing between actual and imagined perceptions, which would be analogous to not knowing that I'm in a real world because it's possible that I'm in a matrix and I can't distinguish between the two.
Yes, depending on your definition.
But I would totally disagree with that. I would say that just because it's possible that I'm in a matrix doesn't mean I can't know that I'm not.
I would say it's
possible that
because I can know that it's possible. I know that I'm not.
Oh,
because if I were in the Matrix, I couldn't even be sure whether or not my disposition to claim that I know that the words "it is possible" are meaningful or anything like that was the result of a computer screwing with my brains. But so the formulation of the entire, this is where me and Barney disagree, but the formulation of the entire skeptical scenario is contingent on the fact that you're not in the skeptical scenario.
Really, that's interesting. I might disagree with that. That's interesting, though. You want to go down that road?
And my position on that is simply, it's irrelevant. If you are in the Matrix, you are in the Matrix. You are still perceiving
ontologically irrelevant.
No, but that ontology is beyond your epistemic limit, so you...
I disagree. I disagree.
And if you find out, then you will know.
That's not enough to overturn my knowledge that I'm not. I'm sorry.
Like,
yeah, I know, but you have to believe in God to overturn that, and I don't.
Oh, not necessarily. I would still have my epistemology without my theistic belief.
Okay, get out of the Matrix.
That assumes I'm in.
What?
That assumes I'm in the Matrix.
No.
He means demonstrate how it works.
Exactly.
Oh, my theory of knowledge is that I have knowledge about the external world up until I have reason to think that I'm not, and the mere possibility of my not having the knowledge of that I am in an external world is not sufficient to overturn that belief.
And you're objecting to my first premise?
Oh, it's not dependent on mere perception, though.
Yeah, well, possibility
I have a whole... Right, exactly. So possibly I'm in the Matrix doesn't imply actually I'm in the Matrix.
So what you're saying, so you take sort of like a, it seems to me that I am in the actual world. I have no reason to believe otherwise, therefore I'm in the actual world. Or it seems to me that, yeah.
Sure.
I have every reason to think I'm in the actual world, and the mere possibility that I'm not is not sufficient to overturn that knowledge. I need good reasons to think that there actually is a Matrix, and mere possibility isn't sufficient for being a good reason to think I'm not.
Or phenomenal conservatism, or there's a whole bunch of different ways of articulating it. Like,
well, it's a burden of proof question. It's a burden of proof. The burden of proof is on the person that says that I am in the Matrix.
Well, what is the
possibility?
Burden of proof. Burden of proof is more of a question of persuasion in my mind.
To persuade you that I know that I'm not in the Matrix?
No.
Yeah, I agree.
The very idea of the burden of proof is like a kind of it's in my mind, and maybe I'm like, we speak of the burden of proof insofar as we want to persuade other people of something being true. Where like my knowing something has absolutely nothing to do with my having met the burden of proof.
Are you saying you don't have a burden of proof toward yourself?
Well, I have the burden of proof to establish, like, maybe my knowledge of the external world. But once someone comes up to me and says, it's possible you're in the Matrix, the burden of proof shifts onto that person to demonstrate why the mere possibility is sufficient to overturn my knowledge. That I'm in the actual world.
It is sufficient because the distinction between a person being right in that case and the distinction between a person being wrong in that case is absolutely zero.
All right. So you would narrow down my knowledge to only necessary propositions, which I think
is completely
knowledge way down to what I think. I know all kinds of contingent truths.
Yeah.
I know I'm talking to you. I know there's a bottle of water here. I
And
remember what I had for breakfast. I have all kind of knowledge of contingent truths. So I think the burden of proof would be on you now to demonstrate why knowledge is confined to just necessary truths.
I solved that problem by making a distinction between two classes of truth. Under one class of truth, I'm an agnostic about the existence of God, but also about the existence of my hands and the existence of my eyes.
Mm-hmm. I'm not.
Right. Under the other, I'm an atheist because I know that I have hands and I know that there isn't a God. And yes, there is a possibility that I'm wrong about both of those things. So
okay, that's fine.
That's
so just because it's possible that you're wrong, that would imply that it's not the case that you only have knowledge of necessary propositions.
Yeah, I would say that those two things don't exclude each other. Those are just two different definitions of knowledge. If
What
there
two
is a
things?
possibility, if the possibility limiting things to knowing only necessary things, and possibility
Oh, right, yeah.
being
It's not necessarily the case that I'm not in the matrix. It's just
exactly.
it's contingently the case. I don't care what I'm doing in other possible worlds. I care about
Exactly.
where I'm at in the actual world.
Yeah. And just like you, as much as I know that I have hands, I know that I'm not in the matrix, and yeah, but I could be wrong about that.
And that just substantiates my point that mere possibility isn't enough to overturn my knowledge of what I know in the actual world.
Okay. But so for me, I cannot marry myself to either of those definitions of knowledge. There is one that I use for practical reasons. There is one that I understand and accept as a necessary concept in reasoning. And the fact that it's possible means that it's possible, and I could be wrong about the other one.
Sure.
I could be wrong.
Does
not preclude that I know it in the other
exactly. Yeah.
The word no. Yeah.
I agree. Just because you could be wrong doesn't give you a reason for why you are wrong.
Well, there's two sense. So I would say that there's an ambiguity here. So if I know something, then that implies it's true. So it's not possible for me to both know something and be wrong.
True in the actual world.
Yes,
if you're talking about a contingent truth.
Yeah. So
it's possible for you to find out that you never knew it.
Yeah, like I could. So I can think that I know a thing and be wrong, right? So that's Wittgenstein's old.
Yeah.
We often forget the phrase "I think that I knew." I thought that I knew, but that just means that the inference to the fact that we know things is defeasible. It doesn't mean that it's not knowledge gaining. So
sure.
In fact, that's how I resolve the issue of the KK, like the keeping the ability to, like, how do you know that you know higher order knowledge? It's like, well, it seems that I know something and I have no reason to believe otherwise. And therefore I know it. And it seems that I know it, and I have no reason to believe otherwise, therefore I know it. It seems that I know it. So
well,
that's how
seemings have to do with justification, though, not knowledge. Phenomenal conservatism. It has to do with just mere prima facie justification.
By that definition of knowledge, my first 5 premises stand.
I'm sorry, what? Say that again?
By that definition of knowledge, and by that reasoning, my first 5 premises stand.
I dispute that, though. I think it just has to do with justification, not knowledge. So you would be justified in believing 1 through 5, but you wouldn't know it. You need something else.
I'm justified in believing that I exist by me experiencing that I perceive.
How do you know you experience that you perceive?
How do you know that you're not in the matrix?
Okay, is that good? So is that what you're saying? That because it's possible that your experiences aren't hooking you up with actual perceptions doesn't mean you're not actually having perceptions?
Yeah.
Cool.
That's the whole point. I'm building up from what I experience.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there will always be a possibility that I'm a Boltzmann brain. There will always be a possibility of that I'm being fooled by the card.
This is what the presuppositionalists get wrong. They equate knowledge with it's not possible for you to be wrong, which is, I don't think any epistemologist actually takes that tack. None that I've read.
And 14 just defines the epistemic limit of that knowledge.
I perceive that I can at least sometimes distinguish.
Or 13.
Sure. I mean, that's just appearance and reality, probably.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I perceive that some perceptions that I recall as imaginary are immediately actual. I know that I have imagination from 1-6-13. I don't think these are good inferences. I'm gonna take this home as homework, and I'm gonna help you out, Barney. There's some jumps in here. Or Frank could probably too. He's probably more fresh with logic than I am.
Now I'll if ever I complete it, I will share it, but I will likely not. No, so
that's the meta critique then. That's it. The project is doomed to not to fail, but to be incomplete.
Yes. But on some level, I'm not really joking when I say that it's a piece of poetry, right? It's me working out things with my internal logic, not
BRB. Be right back.
Things have to rhyme and make sense to me. Modern art, the worst kind of art. Which is such a dodge and evasion.
No, there's nothing wrong with trying to make it so that things make sense to you. The issue is well, like one moment. I'm trying to think of. I'm looking up something that may or may not help me think of what I'm trying to say.
The one thing that I would definitely need to add is commentary on each line. Or something that can be expanded to explain, at least give a definition of the concept that I'm describing. Because when I say that I know that time exists, that's not a definition of time that's coherent with standard definitions, neither in physics nor philosophy, I think. It is simply time as a consequence of me having the experience of recollection. It is the time that a Boltzmann brain could perceive as past. What? Sorry?
So, like I told you earlier on, like the way I perceive this is like as I, an individual coming out of extreme skepticism, is that there's sort of two paths before me: attempt to continually work out a system like this, and then attempt to just jump back into the old system, which I was in, which allows me to still do that, but with certain very clear dogmatic confines built up by a certain pre-existent authority. This particular method inherently is kind of anti-authoritarian, arguably speaking. It's by reason alone. It's a kind of rationalism in a sense. That might not quite be the fairest characterization of it, because again, I'm characterizing myself to some degree.
Yeah, that's fair. That's... A good work of art should provoke introspection.
But like, what is... So Chesterton, I didn't actually read his work on this, but I was reading Neil Alquist's commentary. And it's something like art for art's sake is no good.
L'art pour l'artism, yeah, that's the worst thing that ever happened.
So for For what or whose sake are you doing this?
For my own. It's so I am doing it for myself. I do intend to offer it up as I am offering it up right now for critique, for being a conversation piece, for hopefully instigating some thinking in somebody. Right? When you say that when you look at this, you automatically analyze yourself. That's perfect, I would say. So it's not art for art's sake. It's intended to have a consequence.
So another way of putting is like, that's good, right? The next question then is, what is the highest purpose you can imagine putting anything to?
What is the highest purpose I can imagine putting anything to? I'm not capable of deciphering that question at the moment. That's so general and so vague that I don't have a handle to grab onto.
What is the highest purpose you can imagine putting something like this to? Is it what you've described? Is it for yourself and for the contemplation of other people, or is there something higher you can imagine putting it to?
It would be hubris to imagine that this could have some deep philosophical value, but
that's not quite what I mean.
That would be something that I would be elated by, right? If it turns out that I complete the project and that project is something that furthers human thought and understanding and but intending it for that would be hubris and would be wrong at the get-go from my perspective.
You know, Chesterton just keeps popping up in my head. He once said that humility was once supposed to be in the organ of ambition, not in the organ of conviction. So in a sense, he's kind of agreeing with you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he said the great skyscrapers we saw are monuments to humility, right? So, and what he meant by that roughly was that modesty was supposed to
So if I had the ambition of it being great work, great philosophical work, I couldn't even start. It would be too great a burden to bear, right? I couldn't justify putting the first line down. But if I treat it as my toy and my mental exercise, then I can let it flow freely and see where it gets me, and hopefully at some point perceive the errors that I've made or reformulate it in a way which works, and that has a chance of achieving some merit. And if everybody did that, if everybody didn't aspire but wasn't passive through their non aspiration, I think that great things could be and are accomplished, right? All the works of art and philosophy and science and are done by people who just do them, who go out and do things, and very few of those things turn out to be great. Very many more things just are and are somewhat irrelevant. And I expect this to be irrelevant, but I would hope that it can be more than that. Otherwise, I'm just having fun.
I can't disagree, but I can't. There's like a weird kind of half-formed intuition which is telling me not to agree either. It's like something is slightly out of shift, and I can't tell what it is. It's so entirely minor that it's I can't even put it into words. So it's like really,
it's the problem of the paradigm. So one thing that I had a 5-hour hangout with MJ on topic of demarcation of science, and this is kind of a continuation of that. All the problems that are presented are, from my standpoint, related to this. That they all seem to insist on working around the epistemic limit. And I would say no, accept it, embrace it, recognize it, know where to place it. And it also relates to our conversations about
principles of sufficient reason.
Yeah, principles of sufficient reason. Right. To that singularity of reason, where, and again, to postmodernism, looking at things from different perspectives to find the intersection which is sound, which is, and to the infinitism, foundationalism, coherentism problem that I've been talking about, where those three have very, very distinct problems at the outlying edges, but they have an intersection where they all agree. And there where they agree, you're confident that that is so. The reason works within their intersection.
What are we talking about?
Life, the universe, everything.
And so the Raven problem, the group problem, all of those things, I would say, are just people sussing out epistemic limits, and instead of recognizing where that limit is, or that there is such a limit, saying, oh no, there might be something that we don't know. Fuck, this whole thing is screwed.
I don't know if I talked with you about this or if this was me just thinking to myself. So, like, so tell me if I've used this line before. How do you discern whether or not it's within your epistemic limit to determine what the epistemic limit is? Have I asked you something like that before?
I don't know. Possibly not.
So, like, you're talking about placing the epistemic limit here or there. The question is, well, that presupposes that you're able to determine where the epistemic limit is, which means it's within your epistemic limit to discern where the epistemic limit is. How do you know that it's within your epistemic limit to discern where the epistemic limit is? How do you know that that's not beyond your kin, discerning the particular location of the
I might not be able to discern the particular location, but I might be able to discern that some points are beyond it. I might be able to discern which points are beyond it. Not all of them, but some of them, right?
So how did you discern that? Sorry, that sounds so, because I'm telling you, I sound more and more like a presuppositionalist the more I get.
No, these are good questions. These are good questions.
Because that's the presuppositionalist question. Like, how do you know that?
So from my point of view, that relates to what MJ was talking about. burden of proof, and so as you move away from your epistemic position, from the point of I know that I am, towards any outlier, that certainty of knowledge decreases. Damn it. I don't think I'm making much sense here, but
We miss seeing your face. You don't want to look at me right now, though. Please don't.
You have like a worm coming out of this.
Oh, no, I feel awful today.
So
the scales of it's possible are as you get further away, they tip to equality, and from my point of view, people tend to go like, okay, it's going this way now, we should be able to go this way all the way, and that's the only way I can see you can justify God. But there is a point where you no longer have the justification to confirm it, that it makes sense because you were going that way and then you went that way. But if you were going slightly differently, you would end up at a completely different point. And when that possibility space gets wide enough that you can no longer claim knowledge, you have obviously crossed that threshold, that literally singularity of knowledge. The singularity means the point where knowledge is no longer possible, where we are only talking about probabilities and consequences of our thought processes, right?
Okay, so there's a distinction between setting down a criterion for what constitutes epistemic limitations and knowing that which lies beyond epistemic limitations. So the criterion itself could still be within your epistemic limitations. That makes sense, right, Frank?
I was zoned out for a bit. What would you say?
Yeah, and for some things it is. Like there are things where we clearly know within an inch of where the epistemic limit is, and we call those.
And the only thing we can know about it is that it has the property of being beyond our epistemic limit.
And those things are in science called singularities, right? Where our current knowledge and understanding literally breaks down to such a point that you can talk and speculate about what's beyond it, but you cannot know because something is broken.
I might be wrong here, but it seems to me that you're more or less laying out the categories of what epistemic, what like it's you have the, well, if something is beyond our epistemic limit, it's like this. If something's within our epistemic limit, it's like this. And there might be a fuzzy area in between. Where we can,
and the fuzziness can be either very narrow or very.
That's more of an explanation of the nature of epistemic limits. It doesn't quite answer the question, how do you know all of this? Like, how do you know when? A better way of putting the question then would be, how do you know when something is clearly within the epistemic limit, when it's clearly outside, and when it's fuzzily within the boundaries of the fuzziness? How do you discern that? Is there a higher order vagueness going on? Is it, well, even that is fuzzy. It's not entirely clear, and then there's a higher order vagueness there, and nth order vagueness where you have this kind of, or nth order fuzziness where. Yes. Where it's not clear that it's clear that it's not clear, which is just to say that you don't know what you're saying.
Yeah, the answer to the question is yes.
That's just another way of saying that you can't ever tell what the epistemic limit is, which presupposes that it's within your epistemic limit to discern where the epistemic limit is.
Oh, but I'm saying that there are different kinds of epistemic limits, that some epistemic limits we very well know what they are.
Oh, it's okay. So you're saying there's okay. So there are things that are known, and among the things that are known are the epistemic limits. But there's also unknown epistemic limits, and then there's things which may or may not be. I don't know. I don't know. I'll stop asking questions.
Is this room called the Demarcation Problem, Part 2?
Is it?
Yeah,
Is,
it
is
is.
that what we're talking about?
Oh, okay, never mind. It says maybe on the side, so we can talk about whatever we want.
Yeah, exactly. So, the intention of this hangout.
I just subscribed to your channel.
I saw you popped up. mjdamore just subscribed to your channel. Woohoo!
Yeah, it's because you brought me into the room. I completely ruined everything.
No.
You were once
I like
again.
talking,
You were
Frank.
invited to ruin everything
Yeah.
because this is the kind of conversation I want to have, and because MJ said he's only at 20%, and we're not going to solve the demarcation problem with him being at 20%.
Frank, you're where I was about 6 years ago. I need to lead you out of the darkness and into the light.
What do you mean?
With your struggle with skepticism and how you just got out of it into a bare theism, right? Isn't that where you're at?
Roughly, yeah.
That's what I meant. I'm not there anymore. Who are you currently reading?
Nobody. Is there somebody I'm currently reading? Because like the way I read is completely. I don't read consistently.
No.
I have bad reading habits. Who am I reading currently? I don't think I'm reading. Who am I? Is it who am I? Who am I reading?
Go back to Barney's premise one, man. Barney, put that thing back up. We need to see premise one for Frank.
I was going over. I was going over. I'm more like going over stuff. I don't know.
There it is, Frank. One, I perceive something. There it is. Okay, are you there yet?
I need a reboot, Marty.
You need to know that you are. You need to know that you know that you are.
But
Now
you could be wrong.
Now you're out of the void. Barney, that's not helping.
You could be just imagining it.
It doesn't say that on the text, so we're not going to consider that.
My approach to reading.
Yes, it does. It says so on 13 and 14.
We're not there yet, Barney. We're on 1 and 2.
Oh, yeah. You perceive things. Therefore, you are, and you are self-aware, and you know something. Yeah. And there is a reality.
My approach to reading is a mixture of my own vices plus like my attempt to kind of re-rig my own vices in accordance with some advice given by Bishop Fulton Sheen. So it says you sort of taste, as it were, like it uses this analogy of the digestive system with respect to like encountering stuff, and the idea is that taste, chew, digest, or something like that. And so I have a couple of books that I'm like skimming through. Like, so I bought this a while ago. Ruling Passions. It's It's basically the source book for quasi-realism.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Again, I tried to get through it a bit more. I got about like a little bit. This is a book I bought a long time ago that I tried reading again.
I just had a really good idea, Frank.
What?
We should use these hangouts as book clubs.
Sure.
And so we could hold each other accountable to actually go through a book. That would be so cool. Where we could actually read the entire book over a series of hangouts and pause wherever we want to pause after paragraphs.
I actually did that before with a couple of other guys. We never get through it. It's like, well, no, we actually did. We got through something by August.
The thing, though. We should put strictures on it because we don't want it to turn into an hour conversation after the first paragraph. So we could have like after hangouts where we're taking notes the entire time we're actually reading the book. And then we could do like an after hangout after like a chapter or a subsection or something. And we could like make our way through entire books in this community. That would be awesome.
So
I think it'd be great.
Many people have tried this before, just so you know, and I've been among them.
Running into some copyright issues there. Unless you're...
Oh, that's only if we get found out, though, Barney.
Yeah.
That's why I'm going to make this under a pseudonym.
You can always pick scholastics, which are way beyond copyright.
if I were to read a paragraph from a book, would that violate copyright? Like a recent book?
It's the what's it called? The
Fair use
yeah, fair use.
depends. It very much depends. If you're reading it for education purposes, you can argue.
Well, we don't have to go live, guys. You know, we can just do that little call thing.
So one thing we could definitely do is read it offline and then go online for commentary.
Yeah, you have to do homework. So Frank, we'll know if you got distracted.
I gotta buy the book first. I usually don't have the money. Oh, I love this meme.
We don't have to do books either. We could look up essays by philosophers. I mean,
Yeah,
on different topics. It doesn't have to be like a whole doorstop.
I had a hangout with a bunch of people. We did the same thing. As I said, I've done this before, and we read the essay. Is existentialism is a humanism or whatever like that?
Okay. Yeah.
We read,
Not bad.
I don't even remember any of that. It was a while ago.
That's a good idea. Yeah. So what should we read?
Well, do you have any good postmodernist essays?
Well, should we agree on a topic first before we agree on a particular essay?
Yeah. So topic.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm brainstorming out loud. So let me list these out. Book club, essay club, book essay club. One. Right. Postmodernism.
But before we start with the book club, there's one thing I would really like to resolve first, and that's the demarcation problem. We need.
We're not going to resolve that.
Oh, come on.
Oh, I'll definitely go into it, but that's why it's a problem. It's
nah.
It is a problem.
Science is just the opposite. Is just that which is used to advance art, and art is just that stuff which is used to advance science. There you go. We've defined it all. It doesn't matter what it is.
There it is.
Old distinction. Science is is that thing which is related to art. As art is related to science.
The art of science.
So I'll skip to it. Various criteria have been proposed in the last century. I'm skipping down to my notes just so Barney's video isn't completely irrelevant. Have been proposed in the last century and a half as characterizations of what it means for something to be science. Among the proposed criteria for demarcating science from non-science have been science explains by reference to natural law. Science only makes reference to observable entities. Scientific hypotheses are testable and or falsifiable. Science makes predictions about the future. Science explains by reference to mechanisms. Scientific explanations are tentative. Scientific explanations only make reference to material events and processes. Science is methodologically naturalistic. And briefly, I'm not going to go through all of this, but in response, you can say, oh, sorry, Barney, what's up?
I would say...
I still have your definition, by the way. I'm keeping that before me.
Those all define natural sciences. Right?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. The hard sciences. Then you have that line between what's the demarcation between soft and hard sciences. That's another question. Yeah. But as far as the wider scope of let's say the Latin scientia or something like that, yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to go by those methodology. But then the scienticizers, remember the scienticizers that I'm writing my essay on, scientism?
Yeah.
They think that the methodologies of the hard sciences are the only way to get knowledge. Then my brief response is many laws are descriptive, not explanatory, and historical sciences, like what Barney just mentioned. This is just the natural sciences, but historical sciences often explained by reference to singular events, non-repeatable singular events. Modern physics postulates many unobservable entities to explain what is observed. Barney would agree with that. Testability, falsifiability are closely connected with observability. The existence of unobservable entities can be justified as the best explanation of certain observable effects, and more broadly, theories can be tested by their explanatory power with reference to a range of data. In regard to predictions, origins theories often offer reconstructions ex post facto. Predictions about what we should find if such theories are true render falsifiability highly problematic because, as paleontologists are fond of remarking, the absence of evidence is not reliably interpreted as evidence of absence or non-existence. Many scientific theories, Newtonian gravitation, quantum mechanics, are not mechanistic. Furthermore, if put forward as an objection to, for example, intelligent design, it begs the very question at issue by insisting that all scientific theories must explain by reference to the mechanistic interaction of material entities. Scientific explanations are said to be tentative, but other kinds of explanations can be tentative too. The criterion isn't sufficient, and the scientific community sometimes clings tenaciously to a theory that is widely recognized as inadequate because it's either the only theory it has, like what we talked about with Kuhn, or the only theory it is willing to accept, so the criterion isn't necessary either, in the sense that it can be ignored indefinitely in practice. I'm going to skip methodological naturalism. So my summary here, real quick, this will be the last thing I say.
Okay.
So many branches of science have distinctive methods and practices, but none of them constitute, it's the key point, none of them constitute necessary and sufficient criteria for the practice of science across the board. For example, as many philosophers of science have pointed out, some sciences seek to provide causal explanations of natural phenomena. Others merely provide mathematical descriptions of them. Some sciences seek to discover natural laws. Others try to reconstruct past events. Some sciences perform controlled laboratory experiments. Others don't. Some sciences name, classify, and organize natural objects. Others explain general categories of events, often by reference to natural laws or general theories. Some sciences construct simplified and idealized models of natural phenomena. Others don't. Some sciences study repeatable phenomena. Some don't. Some sciences assess their theories by making predictions. Others test their theories by evaluating their explanatory power. Some use both. Some sciences test theories in isolation. Others compare the predictive or explanatory power of competing hypotheses in an effort to determine the best explanation. Some sciences study only what can be directly observed. Other sciences make inferences about entities or processes that cannot be observed directly and are only known through the effects they are postulated to have. Some sciences reason deductively, some reason inductively, some reason abductively, and some use all three modes of inference. So given this diversity, how can one argue in regard to any evidence-based mode of rational explanation that it is or is not science? Any defense or rejection of something as scientific or unscientific, respectively, requires a definition of science, and there are no universally necessary and sufficient criteria in the offing for this purpose. And my phone is ringing, so I will be right back. I so apologize. This is my landlord. I gotta go 1 second.
Go ahead.
I hate when this freaking happens. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Well, that was convenient.
I'm still here, just in case you're wondering.
That's okay. I appreciate you still being here, just in case you were wondering. Now I'm gonna turn off my camera for a minute as well. This will be the best part of the stream. When we all shut up.
I opened my mic just so I can laugh. Ha ha ha.
The thing is that this is the topic that I really want to get to and see how my naive definition holds up to the problems that NJ is lining up, and this turned out as the worst possible. Okay, so here are all the problems, and now I gotta go. Whee!
Yeah, next time don't invite me. It would be I'll distract from everything.
No, but I really do appreciate you being here, and I really do appreciate the conversation. It was hella fun.
All right, it's fun, but if your goal is to get to these particular points, then
Oh, there will be many more. There will be many Mondays and Tuesdays where that conversation can be had. There's no urgency, neither here nor in my Descartes experiment, no in my refutation of the Raven paradox. These are ongoing projects with no necessity to ever finish. Right? It's an exploration.
Sorry, I just found a meme. I was listening though. I was still multitasking. Oh, that was. Sorry. I need to show you. This is hilarious. It's this.
Show me.
Okay, wait. Wait. I'll just
screen share.
No. Well, I don't want to like. Okay, let's see.
Ow. Ow.
I was expecting that. I was scrolling down and I saw that. I usually don't laugh at that kind of stuff, but it was like that was completely unexpected. Am I still screen sharing?
Oh. Nope.
That's terrible. I'm ashamed that I shared that. I was gonna just like.
Nah, that's fine.
It's just so inappropriate. You can tell that I'm like getting tired because I am really my jokes suck.
That's okay. It's 5 a.m. here.
It's 11:17.
So
right.
I don't expect that I'm any more coherent. Oh. Yeah, I really like the one with who died and left Aristotle in charge of ethics.
Yeah, that's good.
That one really made my day.
I found another one. Wait, this is great. Make sure person's name is out of view. Okay. It's a concerned protester.
Wow.
Stop killing alligators to make Gatorade. That is amazing.
But we're aiding gators.
Yeah.
Oh, leave me alone.
Water sucks.
These people always calling me. Okay,
It's just
what are we
your
talking about? Alligators?
Water sucks.
It's just your dishonest
Gatorade better.
of carpet bombing and running away.
That's what I feel like it looks like. Honestly, this keeps happening. Blah blah blah. It's like blah 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 blah. blah. Okay, I gotta go.
Yeah,
It's just like
exactly.
what the heck.
If you had any answers to what I was saying, it's 10 minutes later now, and
Great. This is a good tactic, though, isn't it?
yeah, you get your piece out, and there is no response.
They just run away.
So I'm not sure if it was explicitly stated in my original definition, but yeah,
I got it right here. You want me to read it?
For the sake of history and stuff like that, the attempt of objective recording of data would also be a requirement, because history more or less is that.
That's deep.
It's a component. It should be a component of every science, but the hypothesis testing of hypothesis and all of that in history is just, yeah, here's the data.
Is that your solution?
What? I think that my original definition stands, with that addendum if it wasn't included in it.
Now, if I recall, I have it before me here. It seemed like a slightly modified version of the hypothetical deductive method, right? Speculating to form a hypothesis, verifying the hypothesis, predictions, testability, experimenting observations, and leave whatever is left to experiment further. That might be a typo. Applicable to any form of thought, philosophical analysis. Science is everything that can go through the whole process. It includes the philosophy at the beginning, wild speculation, make up your starting point to form a hypothesis. Is that about right?
Oh, about right, yeah. In the same sense that we have kind of outlined two definitions of knowledge, I would say that there are two definitions of science. One of them would be the inner, more restrictive definition, which would be the objective collection of data and the scientific method as described. So forming a hypothesis, making sure that the hypothesis is testable, like identifying whether the hypothesis is potent or impotent, discarding it if it's impotent, and testing it if it's potent. And
now what I listed before I left, before I ran away, I'm going to attack you now, because it seems like the demarcation problem is saying this. It's saying all these different little constituent properties that you're saying that make up the scientific process, even taken as a whole.
Can I just finish the statement?
Oh, I thought you were finished. My bad. Go ahead. Yeah.
So, as I said, there are two boundaries. One would be the inner boundary, which is what I've just described, and the outer boundary would be whatever is required to make that happen, which includes random exploration, categorization and classification, speculation, philosophy, wild imaginings, and stuff like that.
So non-science.
Non-science in pursuit of making it happen. So stuff like string theory would definitely not fall into the first one, but would definitely fall into the second one, right? Well, hopefully. Okay, now you can.
No, it's fine. We'll go back and forth because I don't want to talk forever. So random exploration, categorization, and what was the other thing you said? I was writing it down. As far as the outer boundary.
Classification and categorization, speculation, forming, interpretation, right?
Now, what do you mean when you say outer boundary? Whatever motivates undertaking the inner boundary?
Yeah, ultimately, yes.
And you're saying that this motivation of undertaking the inner boundary is a part of science, or is there another demarcation there?
I would say that's it.
It's a part of science?
Yes.
Okay, so here's what the critic's going to ask you. Random exploration, categorization, classification, speculation, interpretation. Do any non-sciences do that?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not necessary for science. It's sufficient for science, but not necessary, right?
Yeah.
Right. So a definition of science would give you individually necessary and jointly sufficient conditions that would constitute science. So the outer one would be sufficient but not necessary, and then the
inner one would be necessary but not sufficient.
That's where I would disagree. So the constituents of what would constitute the inner boundary was testability, right? Testability, predictions, experimentation, all that stuff taken together, right?
And
so the proponent of the demarcation problem would say everything that you would list.
And objective recording of data.
Okay, recording of data. And the non-sciences do that too. They objectively record data, right?
Which non-sciences? Define non-sciences.
Like metaphysics. Like if I were to, there's data in metaphysics. So a piece of data in metaphysics would be a consideration of those objects that lack proper parts. That would be a piece of data that the metaphysician would work with to make metaphysical inferences.
Oh, difference between information and data.
What's the difference?
Data is recording of an observation.
Okay, and what about unobservable entities?
Such as?
Such as the subatomic realm.
Such as?
The subatomic realm, unobservable?
It's not unobservable. It's
dark matter.
It's an unknown at this point, but it's not unobservable. So there are things which we have definitely observed about dark matter.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We do not need to. Oh, we've been through this. Dark matter is not necessarily a dark matter particle. Dark matter is a term for whatever dark matter is. If it turns out to be...
Well, let me ask you this then, because maybe we're equivocating on observable. By observable, I mean picturable.
Oh, by observable, I mean that we can see direct consequences of it.
Consequences of it, right? But not it, right?
Yeah. So
okay. So science deals with inferring unobservables from observable effects, right?
Let's say you have black dwarf and a white dwarf orbiting each other. You will never observe the black dwarf.
Okay.
Right. There is no telescope that can show you the black dwarf. But
right.
You can directly infer its existence, its mass. You can find out exact values for certain properties from the orbit of the white dwarf. Right.
Can you infer the existence of necessary properties from contingent properties in a metaphysical argument?
Can you?
Metaphysicians say yes. This is where the demarcation gets blurry. So this is the demarcation problem. I'm not saying any kind of knockdown arguments right now. So basically, you have philosophers of science that would come along and say, what all these little criteria that you're giving me, we can say that it's sufficient but not necessary for science because these other disciplines do the same thing that aren't sciences at all. Because metaphysics isn't science.
So I I would disagree. I would say that metaphysics can be a science. The problem
This is another criticism then, because if you make that move, this is another aspect of the demarcation problem, is you make the application of the word science so wide that it almost becomes a meaningless concept. Like the division of departments at universities into sciences or non-sciences becomes almost arbitrary. So when you universalize that criteria, you pretty much make any knowledge acquisition, any department in a university that goes about finding out things about the world of sciences.
Are you talking about hard sciences, natural sciences, or science in general?
Well, that's the thing. That's a good question, because the demarcation problem can apply to science. It's typically applied to science in general, but yeah, if you want to make it with the hard sciences, there is a clear demarcation with the hard sciences.
So I would say Popper saying that psychology is not a science because it's not falsifiable.
Correct.
I would disagree with that to a point.
Me too, because it's sufficient but not necessary.
It's not. It is. You could say that it's not a science yet, because it's not yet at the.
Well, then what's your criteria for determining why it's not a science yet? Because if you just cling to falsification, I mean, that's been pretty much proven that it is sufficient for science, but not necessary.
Because it's not satisfying the inner criterion.
Okay, predictions, testability, because you can cling to every single one of these. So predictions is sufficient, but not necessary. Testability is sufficient, but not necessary. Experimentation is sufficient, but not necessary. Speculating to form a hypothesis might be necessary, but not sufficient. So every single one of these, even taken together, there's sciences out there that don't undertake the way they do science by taking everything in the definition together. So taking the definition, everything together would be sufficient, but then not necessary as well. And this is the demarcation problem. So like with the hypothetico-deductive method, like I got my Cambridge Dictionary of Philosophy out right now. So because Popper comes on the scene right after this was criticized, because the hypothetico-deductive method was a species of verificationism, not in the bad way, but like justificationism. Like you're actually confirming something to be there without using falsification at all. So you have like, let me see. It's a method of testing hypotheses. It's thought to be preferable to the method of enumerative induction, whose limitations have been decisively demonstrated by Hume. The hypothetico-deductive method had been viewed by many as the ideal scientific method. It applied by introducing an explanatory hypothesis resulting from earlier inductions, a guess, or an act of creative imagination. The hypothesis is logically conjoined with a statement of initial conditions. The purely deductive consequences of this conjunction are derived as predictions, and the statements asserting them are subjected to experimental or observational test. More formally, given H and A, that implies O. H is the hypothesis, A is a statement of initial conditions, and O is one of the testable consequences of H and A. If the hypothesis is all lead is malleable, and this piece of lead is now being hammered, states in the initial conditions, it follows deductively that this piece of lead will change shape. In deductive logic, the schema is H and A implies O, O, therefore H and A, and it's formally invalid. It commits the fallacy of affirming the consequent. But repeated occurrences of O can be said to confirm the conjunction of H and A, or to render it more probable. On the other hand, the schema H and A implies O, not O, which is Popper's falsification, therefore not H and A. That's deductively valid, and for that reason, Karl Popper and his followers think that the hypothetico-deductive method is best employed in seeking falsifications of theoretical hypotheses. Criticisms of the method point out that infinitely many hypotheses can explain in the HD mode a given body of data so that successful predictions are not probative, and that following the Duhem-Quine thesis, it is impossible to test isolated singular hypotheses because they are always contained in complex theories, any one of whose parts is eliminable in the face of negative evidence. So that latter part would be why it's not necessary, but the beginning part in its critique of the affirming the consequent thing and Popper's,
but that
development of it would prove why it's sufficient to be
Did
science.
you just use the one of the paradoxes of induction, like the paradox of the raven or the something?
Just
I
now?
recognize that logical form somewhere.
No, that doesn't have to do with the Raven's paradox. Just has to do with pure inductivism. The hypothetical deductive method was an improvement upon inductivism.
No, so maybe it wasn't Raven. Then it was
The Grew thing.
Is it related to Grew then? Is it related to the new
I
riddle?
don't think so. Let me see. I'll look it up real quick. I'm not exactly sure it's relevant to Grew, but I will verify that.
The new riddle of induction specifically, because Grew is also used in meaning skepticism.
Device theory. It's a paradox in the theory of induction according to which every intuitively acceptable inductive argument A may be mimicked by indefinitely many other inductive arguments, each seemingly quite analogous to A, and therefore seemingly as acceptable, yet each nonetheless intuitively unacceptable, and each yielding a conclusion contradictory to that of A, given the assumption that sufficiently many and varied of the sort of things induced upon exist as yet unexamined, which is the only circumstance in which A is of interest. So suppose the following is an intuitively acceptable inductive argument. A1, all hitherto unobserved emeralds are green. Therefore, all emeralds are green. Now introduce the color predicate Grew, where, for some given, as yet wholly future temporal interval t, an object is Grew, provided it has the property of being either green and first examined before t, or blue and not first examined before t. Then consider the following inductive argument, A2. All hitherto unobserved emeralds are Grew. Therefore, all emeralds are Grew. The premise is true, and A2 is formally analogous to A1, but A2 is intuitively unacceptable. If there are emeralds unexamined before T, then the conclusion of A2 says that these emeralds are blue, whereas the conclusion of A1 says that they are green. And then there's other counted. Yeah, I think it could apply to the hypothetical deductive method. Yeah, I don't see why not. Well, that just proves that it's not necessary, but that you could use it right in some instances and it would be sufficient for doing science, but it's just not necessary. And this is the demarcation problem. For any criteria that you put forth, there's an argument that can be made for why it's sufficient, not necessary, or necessary but not sufficient. X out. Oh no. Oh, dang it. I had my plug plugged in after 100% for like an hour and I didn't even notice it. That drains your battery. Please don't do that. Oh, Barney.
Yeah.
I gotta go. I'm just kidding. Sorry.
that was genuinely funny.
On that note, I gotta go. See you guys.
Bye.
I'll see you guys in a month. Chew on that. That's it. So rather than, I mean, we could probably debate it till the cows come home, but that's pretty much what it is. That's the demarcation problem. And I was making that relevant to my critique of scientism because, I mean, I think you would even disagree with this, Barney. I mean, if you're going to make science include this inner and outer boundary, the scientizers would totally disagree with your outer boundary there. They would want to subsume that in science, in the hard sciences.
I absolutely agree. I agree that they would disagree with me, and I don't mind. Fuck them.
The scientizers.
Yeah.
But there is probably a version of scientism that I'm critiquing right now, which you might like. It's called soft scientism, which says that you can have knowledge in all the other disciplines, but science is the best. It's the best kind of knowledge. And he has this criteria of qualitative and quantitative betterness with regard to one kind of knowledge being better than another. And I'm in the midst of actually critiquing that essay now.
But that is a variant of my statement that science is just a very effective branch of philosophy, right?
Oh, it's the most effective mode of gaining knowledge of the empirical realm.
It's just discard things that we're uncertain about and not sure about, and can discern that we cannot discern about them, and let's figure out things about things that we can discern things about.
No, but you don't think we can discern things non-empirically?
I don't think that we can discern things.
You scienticizer.
We can discern some things about some things. Those things that we can discern about those things, we should discern.
That's tautologist. I want the things to be non-empirical. See, this gets into, I actually have bookmarked right now, different books on metaphysics and metaphilosophy, because the clash and the point of contention between scientizers and philosophers is the disagreement that the methodologies that metaphysicians employ are knowledge conducive. So I'll provide a link here. This is a rough sketch. I thought this guy did a good job, but this is not exhaustive by any means, but research papers, contrary scientism, defending metaphysics. Okay, right here. All right, I'll put this in the thing. See that? Yeah. This is a rough sketch, but basically the contention is that metaphysicians have their own methodologies that are knowledge conducive, that aren't dependent on the sciences at all.
Aren't dependent on the sciences at all?
On the methodologies of the hard sciences, to be more precise. Barney, I'm serious. My phone really is ringing. I'll be right back. I'm sorry, man. This is so annoying. I swear to God. Hold on a second.
Physics, methods, humans and immaterial minds, time travel and backwards causation, the appeal to what one cannot imagine. I appeal to that a lot. Appeal to what one cannot consistently. The appeal to intuitions, intellectual seemings, conceptual analysis, using logic alone. Logical probability, inference to the best account of truth.
I'm gonna go. So
yeah,
nice talking. Tell MJ that I said see you later.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Bye.
Okay, Barney,
Yeah,
are you ready to hate me?
you have to leave.
I actually have to go. The what's it? The landlord is on their way. I have to go buy this screwdriver because my little clicker for my garage isn't working, and I actually have to do this right now because I think they're going to get here by 2:30, and I have to go on base to get this screwdriver so that I can fix this stupid thing. When I get done, want me to message you? I'm sorry.
No, if you're up to it, I'll be away for a couple of hours and then I'll be back. But
Awesome.
yeah, sure. Otherwise,
Where did
just
Frank go? Frank's gone? Okay.
he's gone. He went to sleep. He started drowsing off. Sure, just don't leave me hanging for what 3 weeks.
I know. What the heck? And I think I was actually available to talk because I went into other hangouts. I dropped the ball, man. I'm sorry.
So fair enough. We can do it next time later or whatever. I would actually like to at some point address some of the things that you burden me
Yeah,
with.
and when you address me, I'm going to take notes because I take what you say seriously.
Right.
I do. I got a Barney notes page in my Google Docs. I have inner outer boundaries, your statement of your solution to the problem, your definition of philosophy, and how science is a proper subset of philosophy and a proper subset of metaphysics and ontology, and that science actually determines logic, which I think is demonstrably false, but
Yeah, that's
we'll get there.
Logic and mathematics, and a lot of this, like, I would say that metaphysics, logic, and mathematics are the same class of philosophy in relation to science.
Same class. I guess in a sense, yeah, I'd agree with that.
Right. They are tools that can be used if applicable and can be ignored if not.
I think these tools can reveal reality to me.
There is no obligation of science to use every piece of mathematics that gets
Oh, no, of course not.
investigated in mathematics, and there is no obligation for it to use every piece of metaphysics that gets investigated.
Not every piece.
Not every piece, but
at least one piece.
But some pieces are crucial to it, I would say.
Amen, brother. You sound great. That was awesome. I agree with that.
I wouldn't say that that's controversial. Well, I know that there are scientists.
Oh, it is controversial, big time.
I think I know that there are scientists who would, but they're free to have their own opinion. That does not change the fact that it is so.
Yeah, that's what they would say about their way of doing it too.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
fair enough. As long as it gets the results, I don't mind.
Oh, I mind. I love the results, but I don't want that to mean that we can't speculate about the metaphysical presuppositions that are undergirding their very way of going about science.
You mentioned at some point that somebody was considering closing up metaphysics. Not what courses, not courses, but departments.
Oh, just underfunding them.
Underfunding them?
Because the criteria that they use to determine whether or not they're actually practical are the criteria that they use for the hard sciences. So of course it's not gonna be the same as what the hard sciences are doing. The hard sciences have an advantage. They're actually dealing with empirical phenomena. But these administrators are methodological naturalists. They do not think that you can really get to any kind of non-empirical reality, and even if you could, because it doesn't have any kind of predictive or technological application or things like that, it's just not worth the time to go into finding out whether or not gunk is metaphysically possible. It's not going to be worth their time.
On the other hand, I do very strongly believe that metaphysicians are partly to blame for that.
Boo! How dare you?
Because they're not keeping up. Because
Well, this goes back to what I was saying about the non-overlapping magisteria. For those philosophers of science and the metaphysicians of science, I think they are keeping up. And for the parts of metaphysics and science that do to overlap, they do let the science rebuke their metaphysics when it should. But then there's another meta question about whether or not there's a realm of reality out there where it's non-overlapping.
And in that conversation, one important part will be your invocation of Neo-Lorentzian versus Minkowski spacetime.
It's a good question. I would love to have a hangout with you on that, because I don't see a good reason to give up Neo-Lorentzian interpretation of the formalism.
As soon as anybody can come up with one that works. Right?
An interpretation that works?
Yeah.
Oh, Neo-Lorentzian. It works.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
That's the whole problem. So that do
you know he's getting more and more adherents, right?
Do you have to go or?
Oh no, I have to go. You're suckering me in right now. I like talking about this.
I'm offering you an out.
I will not deny that you think it doesn't work.
I will not deny that there are a lot of philosophers and even quite a few scientists that think there must be some version of Neo-Lorentzian model that would work, except nobody has one. Right?
I got one.
The Neo-Lorentzian model is not a model, it's a statement. It's a statement that some hypothetical Neo-Lorentzian model should work.
Well, I mean, it's a statement that's backed up by explanatory virtues.
And I am going to let you go, and we're going to have a separate hangout on that topic, because that's a topic.
It is a very great topic.
Yeah.
And the more we disagree, the better.
Yeah.
I like those kind of conversations.
And bye.
Oh no, I'm on your bad side now.
End of hangout.
That was a deal.